Good evening. I'd like to call this regular scheduled board meeting for Bedford County School Board for July the 13th, 2023 to order. Dr. Mealy has contacted me and she does have a family medical emergency, so she will not be here this evening. Ms. Johnson, will you please call the roll?
Kirby.
Here.
Mr. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Daniels.
Here.
Mrs. Hairston.
Here.
Mr. Holbrook.
Here.
Mr. Nelms.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion by Mr. Nelms. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Daniels. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The agenda is approved. Moving on, do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion, we go into closed session pursuant to Code of Virginia 2.2-3711A1 to discuss the assignment, appointment, performance, disciplining, and release of contract for specific school board employees, including the evaluation of the superintendent as provided in his contract of employment.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are now in closed session. Do I have a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Nelms. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are officially out of closed session. Ms. Johnson, will you please certify the meeting?
Whereas the Bedford County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And where Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Bedford County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Yes.
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 Moving on to item 3.01, update on zone transfer revocation. Dr. Bergen?
Yes, Madam Chair, this was an addition to the agenda as of yesterday at the request of the Chair of the Board, after board members individually or collectively have heard from members of the community regarding the revocation of zone transfers. This is a topic that we've been discussing for many months. So what we've prepared for you tonight is a review of the information that we have presented over the past several months, how we got to the decision that we got at and the direction we received from the board. So Dr. Woodford, I thank you for your quick turnaround and putting some information together just for our review.
Bergen. Good evening, board members. So based on the request from the agenda change, I'm going to try to provide you with some background information at how we arrived at this point of sending the zone revocation letters and where we are at the moment. So first, excuse me, in the October board meeting, that was the first time we began to discuss staffing standard changes based on board feedback that we were getting with expected cost. I want to remind you, this was a discussion that we had after a concern was brought to us about a class of 27 students at Otter River Elementary. And in that meeting, Dr. Calvert and Mr. Hagler explained how funding was provided for the staffing standards and what the cost would be to add staff. There was a long discussion about what number is too large for a class, where should we split classes. At that time, we were using CARES money to provide 3 additional staff members at Otter River. And we had really looked at that situation and felt like the principal had a really good supportive staffing model in place to help those students. Then in March 14th, we had a budget work session, and Dr. Calvert and Mr. Hagler asked for some clarification on the elementary staffing standards because we were trying to build our budget. And so at that meeting, the board decided and had consensus that they did not want multi-age classrooms. At the April 6th board meeting, the elementary staffing standard report was given on options for elementary staffing and class sizes. At that time, I presented information on options for elementary staffing standards. I also shared that we had some possible, what could we do if we had some concerning class sizes, and I asked the board to provide some direction on how they wanted the executive team to handle large class sizes moving forward. So options included at that time really looking at our SOQs, which is the way we receive money from the state, instead of putting a cap of 27 on classes, or allowing the possibility to use multi-age if necessary, or multi-age type combinations, not necessarily the 2-3 classroom, but possibly a staff member rotating in and out of the classroom to support. Or we also could go back to that implementation of the zone revocation portion of policy JCD. On May the 10th, I sent a Wednesday memo with data on the K-5 class sizes and our projected numbers that we use each year. And I sent that to all the board members and basically said, right now, if we were to do revocations, these are the classes, these are the schools that I have concerns about. On May the 11th, we had another discussion about elementary staffing standard, and action was taken by the board at that time. And the action was that we would have no more than 27 students K-5. We would then use revocation of zone transfers where necessary. Then we could look at larger class sizes, closer to SOQ if that was necessary. And we could then look at multi-age groupings, all of these in these orders. And the last resort was adding teachers because of the cost in the budget. At that time, we discussed that we would have to hold class sizes at 25 as we worked in the summer to allow for student movement in and out of schools over the summer. And so, again, in a Wednesday memo, I shared later on the actual numbers based on what we actually had in Power School of the classes and the schools that were going to be affected. Again, when we looked at numbers, we were looking at 25 as the cutoff so that if we had students coming in or out, we had some room so that we wouldn't have to come back to you and say we need additional money. So on June 7th, I sent that Wednesday memo giving you a little bit more information. On July the 5th, I sent another Wednesday memo with a new regulation of how we would do zone transfer revocations. I sent the letter that was going to be sent to the parents to make them aware of the revocation, and then the number of students we were moving from each school and the grade level as of that day. Mr. Blankenship and I had to wait until we did the actual Power School rollover, which was the last week in June. We needed to be able to see how many kindergartners we had registered before the end of the school year, and we needed to see which students were moving in and out, and then the rollover gave us an accurate number. We were meticulous in trying to look at where students lived, if we thought we might have a student moving out. We did not want to send letters and upset people if we were later going to come back and say, you're on a wait list and your child might get back in. So we were trying to be very careful, but we felt like we had to pull the trigger because it was July. And so on July the 7th, we did send the letters out. So the letters reflected these grade levels and schools that were affected. At Bedford Elementary, we had to revoke 8 fifth grade transfers. At Boonesboro, we had 2 in 4th grade, 1 in 5th grade. Forest Elementary, we had 1 in 5th grade. Otter River, we had 3 at 1st grade, 5 at 2nd grade, 4 at 3rd grade. Manita, in 3rd grade, we had 4, with the possibility of adding 2 more. And actually, we stopped because we started getting questions from board members, and so we have not done those extra 2 revocations. We're waiting to see if there's additional guidance that you'll provide to us. At New London, we have 1 1st grader, Stewartsville, 2 3rd graders, 1 4th grader, 6 5th graders, and at Thomas Jefferson, 4 5th graders. So that was a total of 42 zone revocations. So I've been asked to just possibly give some options of what we can do. First, we can stay with the decision that the board made in May. I mean, that was a decision after months of thinking about it that the board wanted to follow. So that's one option. I do think you could remove the caveats to the staffing standard, especially the no multi-age classes or multi-age groupings, and the limit of 27 students. A couple of things I want to point out. For the last 10 years or so, we've had staffing standards, and this is the first time we as a staff have not been given that flexibility to kind of work through issues. During the summer, what is happening is students are coming in and going out and coming in and going out. Every Monday, Dr. Calvert and Mr. Hagler and I look at what is the actual enrollment? Do we have a concern? What are the resources already at the school? Is there a resource where we have a small class over here that we can move a teacher to where we have a larger class? And honestly, we've been able to handle that really when we've had issues of high enrollment. I think what probably was a little bit more difficult was that we were trying to get that down, those classes to 25, so we had to make a cutoff decision where typically in the summer we are making decisions with the fluidity of enrollment. And we've always been able to really manage that. So you can remove the caveats, give us a little bit more freedom to do what I think, our staff is pretty good at doing, looking at our resources and looking at what options we can provide. The other thing is you can look at class sizes that are closer to SOQs. SOQs, as you know, we've talked about, that is how we are funded in our budget to put teachers in the classroom. If you don't want to do a zone revocation, I think everyone may need to realize that we might have larger class sizes that get up to 27, 28. Again, we've always tried to avoid that, and we've always been able to kind of work through that, just like we did last year when there was concerns and we came to you with some solutions of how to deal with that. If you do that, you won't have to add any more money to the budget. Or you can fund additional staff. So basically what we would do, and again, the numbers look different than what we're revocating because I'm looking at classes that I know will go right back up to 27 or 28. So we would have to look at adding 2 teachers at Boonesboro, 1 at Otter River, 2 at Stewartsville, and 1 at Manita if you wanted to keep things as they are. 6 additional teachers would be an estimated cost of $456,000, or 6 additional aides to support larger classes would be a total of about $170,000. I think what we have to think about is projecting what's going to happen down the road. So this would create a change to the budget that you've approved. We can be creative as a staff, classes that are a little larger, putting some support in, using title dollars differently. And when I say multi-age, I shared with you, if we were to do that, it would take a lot of training. I think we would know that we had to put our best teachers in those classrooms, and maybe those kids are not in a multi-age all day, but maybe we're grouping for reading and math, we're bringing in some supports, they're together maybe for science, history. But again, those are some options that we can consider, and I'm happy to have suggestions from you or take any questions about what you're concerned with tonight.
Questions for Dr. Woodford?
I do have a question, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Dr. Woodford, in regards to your suggestion for multi-age classes, and as you stated, we've had those before. What are your thoughts on the multi-age for upper grade levels? I know you've heard me and you know that I've had the experience of working with multi-age classes. I'm not a supporter of it.
Right.
But I think perhaps maybe in the upper grades, with the right individuals in place leading the way, it could possibly work and be successful.
I think that I think it is doable at any grade level. I think you hit the key there, is you want to put your strongest teachers there. We don't want to put our first year teachers in a class like that because we need that experience. And those would be conversations we'd have to have with the principal to say, we might need to move some teachers around, we might need to do something different. We might need to use other resources in our school. Our smaller schools, the board put a full-time librarian there. So maybe our librarian can offer some support in classes. One of the issues that Dr. Calvert and I've talked about today is we're still struggling to get teachers and to get paraprofessionals. I would say if I had a good veteran teacher in a class of 27, I would be fine with that rather than having a young teacher who is maybe struggling a little bit in a larger class. So I think that's why, we haven't had multi-age for several years, and I think that's because we've tried to be really creative with the resources we have on site and that we have within the division. And we've tried to be creative with the use of additional funds that we have. I think we could work through every one of these situations if given some freedom and flexibility. I do think that there may be some of our smaller schools, and I do say Otter River is one that is kind of sticking out there. They hover on that 26, 27, 28. And for instance, if we would have revoked first grade zone transfers, the parents who were upset with the 27 in first grade last year, if we would have revoked, we could have gotten them down to 23 in a classroom. That would have made some parents very happy and some parents very sad because their children had started at Otter River. So every situation is different in a school, and again, I think the tighter our hands are tied, the harder it is to be flexible and make decisions and try to do what's best for kids. Because I think there's so much to look at: experience, other resources in the class, are there other funds, or how do we support? I do think we have to start having a conversation long term about what we do in the small schools that are requiring a lot of extra staff support that cause, we have in some of our smaller schools classes of 11 or 12.
Was going to lead me to my next question. Not to put any school on the spot, and you don't have to do that. You could just maybe tell me the number of schools that we have that have such low enrollment that potentially they're not meeting,
Right.
Our class size right now. They're below that.
The ones, I can tell you almost all of our schools with kindergarten. Our kindergarten enrollment, Mr. Blankenship and I can't tell if it is people just haven't come to register their kindergartners, they're waiting closer to school and we're going to get this big influx, or they're just naturally lower for some reason. So we have a lot of schools that have very low kindergarten enrollment. So, we've talked about, could we move a teacher to another school? Again, I think we're trying to watch those numbers because you hate to pull a teacher out and then put them right back in. And all of our kindergartners are kind of like that, even in some schools that typically get their enrollment in pretty quick. But I will say what I do know about Mr. Blankenship's projections is he's pretty much on target every year. He's really good with his projections. And so as we're looking at his projected numbers and what we have actually on site. Where some of our schools have really smaller class sizes, they're using their Title I dollars to make those classes smaller. They've put additional teachers in. And the caveat there is, if we were to take a non-Title I school, and we were to give them extra staff, then you have to do that at all of your Title I schools too, which raises your budget up again. So we do have some small class sizes, but that's because principals have said, I'm going to use my Title I resources to lower my class sizes because we're in a school with a larger disadvantaged population. So.
If I recall, during our discussion, and this was early in the process of us discussing these potential changes, we had talked about placing a paraprofessional in these classrooms where we are exceeding. So is that being
So
figured in this?
there were two conversations. One of those paraprofessional conversations happened for last year. So when we were seeing a few classes with large class sizes, Mr. Hagler and Dr. Calvert said we could use CARES money, add some staff for the rest of this year. When we got to asking about what was the priority of the board, the final priority, the last resort was to add staff, meaning teachers or aides. So that was not part of the final budget that the board approved, because the board said, we want you to look at revocations, we want you to look at multi-age, we want you to do all of these things first. So we just did not put that in the budget. And so, no, we have not considered that at this point.
So in looking at your document here, for 6 additional aides, it would be $170,000. So my question, I guess, would be to Mr. Hagner now. Do we have $170,000?
It's not been budgeted for. So you'd have to go back to the budget and make cuts of 170. I will say this, and Dr. Woodford knows, this is the last year for ESSER funds. There is money in the operating budget for learning loss for this year that could be used. I'd let her speak to that. If she's already identified where we wanted to spend that money, might have already been identified, and maybe we're already launching on some of those things. But we were trying to get down to 0 teachers being used for COVID money this year, because that's the reality that we're going to have to face next year. But we did place some money into the operating budget for learning loss. Some of that's going to be going for the distance learning, but there's additional funds that could be used there, but there's no funds in there to sustain it. It would have to be, with no more revenue, you have to cut a line in order to find that. But you could use the ESSER 3 COVID money for learning loss for this 1 year.
I think it's really crucial and so important, as Dr. Woodford spoke to, the fact that we've got to think ahead and plan for this. It's been a problem. It's been a concern for so many years, and we just can't keep kicking the can down the road. I certainly thought that the solution to some degree was reasonable, but I also think it's important that we understand too where our greatest needs are and who really comes first, and it's our students first and foremost. I would ask that Dr. Bergen and the team really take a look at any new positions that you all may be thinking about, entertaining, and maybe target some of those funds towards our elementary school and the staffing here. The staffing needs that our schools have. Do we have new positions that we?
We have cut positions at the central
Okay.
office.
So
We
nothing-
have reorganized in
right.
fashions. We've eliminated secretaries. We've eliminated positions of support. We've downgraded jobs. I think, honestly, I know that is kind of the first thing people think of, but the other piece of that, it's very hard to support schools and get scores up and to support programs and schools if we don't have the staff to do it. But there are no new positions that we have put in our budget. We knew it was going to be a tight year, and we did everything to cut that we could at our level without touching teachers and staff in the schools.
If I can also elaborate on that answer, I also, for our parents who are listening, particularly the parents of the 42 children, this is a painful discussion for them. Particularly when we talk about it, in numbers and budgets, they want to hear that we care about their kids and we're empathetic to the concerns of their children. These are painful decisions that we're making. Ms. Hairston, to some of your questions, whatever the decision is of this board for this coming school year, it's not just one budget cycle, but looking forward, is it sustainable? So whatever we want to put in place now, can we put it in place 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out? And I'm particularly focused, as I've shared with the board, that in 4 budget cycles, we're going to have a $7 million reversion cliff. So adding to the budget is concerning. Kicking the can down the road was your expression. We're not going to be able to kick it when we have a $7 million cliff. So we've already set aside $600,000 that we're not spending in the operating budget out of new funding this year to prepare for that cliff, and we will continue to do that, so there will be no cliff. Secondly, even with that reduction, as we've shared with the board previously, we have 109 positions currently in our schools that exceed the level of funding we receive from the state. Mr. Hagler did a very detailed analysis of how much money do we receive from the state and how do we spend it. The recommendations from the state, which is 60 cents on the dollar for us, we actually have 18 fewer central office positions than is recommended by the state in the funding formula. 18 fewer, 109 more in the schools. So can we cut and add and make this about budgets? We can. What we would prefer to do is have flexibility to address these as we always have. I just pushed this board for a number because we spent half of the school year last year talking about how many is too many. And so I just asked them to just define how many is too many, and then we'll hold to that. We can manage, we did last year, we managed with 28, 29, and even 30 in some classrooms. We did it with some creative supports within the school, and we can continue to operate in that way and fly well below the SOQs. The SOQs, of course, being 35 in grades 4 and 5. We've never come close to that and never would. And just for the public, these numbers that we're throwing about in this discussion we're talking about, it's very important, and my heart thinks of these 42 children. That's 1% of all of our elementary school children. For the other 99 out of 100 kids, the class sizes are fine. We don't have these issues. And the class size issues are problematic, particularly in the smaller schools. You know, as being a principal of a small school, formerly principal, you don't have a lot of flexibility. I mean, you have 10 positions allocated to the school, and you have 6 grade levels. Which grade levels get 2 and which grade levels give 1? We would love to just say we're just going to have 12 or whatever the grade level is and just multiply and say, but there's an implication in the budget for that in this operating budget and every operating budget moving forward. So our recommendation is either stick with what we've discussed and decided, as painful of it as it is, to enforce the policy as it's always been there. This policy is not new, it's been on the books forever. That revocations can and should occur when there are challenges at the class size level. Stick with that decision, or we can go back and revisit the staffing standards and we can remove the 27 ultimatum, and we can allow for other solutions between our central office supports and our principals in making a determination about what's best for meeting the students' needs. And that could include, not as a first resort, but a last resort, some multi-age groupings, as Dr. Woodford was sharing. I mean, I was an elementary school principal as well. I think the board is 20 years I was in elementary school as a teacher, a principal, and a director of elementary education. It's not a new conversation to me. And multi-age grouping is nothing novel. It's been in place for decades, and you can group students, whether it's K1 or 4 or 5 or anything in between, for reading instruction and or for math instruction. So you're differentiating the number of children who are in front of a teacher for half the day. And for the other half of the day, when they go to music, when they go to art, when they're at PE, when they're at lunch, the class size is larger. We can do that too, with no budget impact and with being able to greatly reduce, if not completely eliminate, the number of revocations that have already been proposed. So I just want direction from the board. I had direction. It's on the agenda tonight at the request of the chair for this discussion, and so I'm going to ask for some finality from the board because school starts in a month.
Madam Chairman, if I may make one more comment, and then I promise I think I'm finished with my questions and comments. When it comes to multi-age, well, everybody knows I'm not a fan of it. However, I know that at Otter River we made it work, and it worked best, I feel, at the upper grade level in 4th and 5th. K3, Those are early years. Those are foundational, true foundational years at an elementary school. And so I want it to be known that I am completely opposed to multi-grades at K-3. I would certainly consider 4th and 5th grade. That's all. Thank you.
Daniels?
So last year, we had that Otter River class that we heard a lot about, and there was 27 in that class. Just now that the year's over and we're heading into a new year, Dr. Woodford, how did those kids perform? Because I think that's important. We were concerned that the performance would not be there. Parents had a lot of concern on that, but overall, how did those kids do?
Overall, on their PALs, which is the only measure we really have in first grade other than teacher tests, but the common between schools, they did very well. Part of that was our decision at the beginning of the year. We did look at that, and most of them, if not all of them, were on or above grade level. So they had a strong foundation, and they had a strong teacher with an aide, and so that was part of our reasoning and thinking through that process. But at the end of the year, they performed well.
I as we batted this around over the last couple months, it was, with the options that we had, I think that we all hemmed and hawed on it. We knew that it was going to make some people happy and some people not. And I think we tried to come up with the right decision. I think that the people I've talked to understand that, but it definitely does have some real world implications. I was very unfamiliar with multi-age. I'm not a teacher, but I do, in the business world, I like to think that, you want to give your people options. You want to say, do you think you can do this? And if you can, I want to give you the running room to be able to do that. It was voted down, but I do think like that is something, if the principal and the teachers and the staff feel like it's something that could work, then I think that that's something that definitely needs to be considered. Again, it's case by case, it's last resort, it's when we can do it. A lot of the parents I spoke to yesterday when I had mentioned this, they were like, oh, that sounds like it could be a pretty good idea. So if you could get buy-in from the parents, and every parent I spoke to yesterday obviously loves their child, obviously wants what's best for them, and is very involved in their child's academic career. And I think that's great, and I know those kids are going to be okay. It doesn't make it any less tough. But I want to say that if we looked at that and we could give you the tools that you needed for that, and you guys think it could work, I would be for that. I believe in flexibility. And I believe if you have the best teachers, again, they know they're good. They know they can do it. They wouldn't put themselves in a position to say, I can do it and I can't, and we'd be able to support them from the administration level. I think it's something we should consider.
Quick question for Dr. Bergen and Ms. Wolford. If we remove the caveats to the staffing standards, do you all feel comfortable that this may help resolve a lot of the issues?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions? Mr. Hill?
Yeah, I have one comment. So I would definitely support removing the cap, whatever we've got it set, as long as you feel like we can be successful. I've said it time and time again, I'm after results. It's all about results for our students, and as long as you guys feel like we can make that work, I absolutely support that. One of the other things, and we can't solve this tonight, but I want to ask you guys to start looking at it. Several years ago, we proposed larger schools, and our community said, absolutely not, we're not interested, and I'm not proposing that. But what I am proposing is that we look at efficiencies with the current schools that we have. And what I mean by that is if we can take and say, Bedford Primary and Bedford Elementary has it today. They're split into a K through 2 and a 3 through 5, and I may have that wrong, K1 or K2, I think it's K through K1. But if we were to take our schools and split them into K2 and 3-5, what efficiencies do we drive with the number of teachers that we need? So for example, if you took Otter River and TJ and teamed those two schools up, if you took a Forest Elementary and an Otter River and teamed those two schools up, Big Island and Boonesboro, and you drove those, what is the efficiencies that that drives for those students in K through 2 and 3 through 5? Now, of course, there's going to be some shakeup or mix, but if we're impacting everybody, but we're saying going forward, we're driving these efficiencies that will allow us to have the right number of employees or head count per grade level, and you're taking advantage of two schools versus trying to force it on one, what is the outcome of that? If it's the wrong model, that's fine, but I think we owe it to our community and to our taxpayers to say, we've looked at every option to drive efficiencies and to make sure, from a student standpoint, we're keeping the classroom sizes based on what we've heard and what we've agreed to, but also being able to afford it and do the right thing in each of those schools. Is that?
Absolutely. And I would just like to say, I think that the staff could possibly come back with some suggestions for the long term. For instance, we've always closed schools that are at or close to capacity, but what we might need to consider, and when I say close, I don't mean shutting the building down, but closing to zone transfers, schools in the future that are teetering on those numbers. So if we, and again, I don't want to keep picking on Otter River, but it's not a title school, so it's harder there. Maybe we need to close that in the future to zone transfers so we get those numbers stabilized, but we don't hurt kids who are there and have been there for 4 or 5 years. And so maybe there's some tough decisions we as a group need to start thinking about early fall for the future.
But I want to make sure you guys understand, I support removing the cap, the multi-classrooms, if that's what it takes to resolve what we've got ourselves into right now. But it can't be a long-term fix. We've got to figure out, how do we make it work? If we're successful, which Otter River shows we were last year in doing that, maybe there's a way we look at, if you have a teacher who has more than that 25 or 27 or 30, how do we provide an incentive for that strong teacher who's willing to take on that additional opportunity?
I would think that hard-to-fill stipend that we have set aside at times, it typically goes to upper level, but I think any teacher who's teaching a large class, who's a veteran, who's really good at it, possibly that's really a hard to, an additional.
I like that.
Yeah. So I just want to, I know you guys haven't voted and you might have more questions, so
I do.
I'll ask mine in just a minute.
I do have one more. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with what Marcus was saying and what Chris was saying. I think we still need a cap, because obviously what happens, we're in this situation now because of, zone transfers, but we could be in this situation because of legitimate people moving there, moving into the
correct.
area. So I think it needs to be a cap, but for the situation we're in, I know it got voted down with the multi-age classroom, but I'm pretty sure I voted for it. I'm not a teacher and I don't know a lot about it either, but, it makes sense, not to use it all the time, but when needed for situations, because it's like, what if you do get to 28? Do you get 2 teachers and now have 2 classes of, 14? It's kind of a gray area there, but we do need to have something,
And I think what we've always tried to do is our cap has always been the highest point of the SOQ, but in our minds, we know, I think Mr. Hagler and Dr. Calvert will tell you that when I was seeing 27, 28 in first grade, I was advocating for a smaller class because I'm an elementary person. So I think some of that is just knowing what the resources are and knowing the students and trying to keep those class sizes under, 30, but there may be some, we have to make some hard decisions. Our kids are coming in and out and we're having a hard time predicting. I think the cap of 27, even though in my mind, I agree, and that's, as the deputy superintendent, that's what I'm thinking about. Having it so strict then made us have to revoke down even farther because we don't know what's happening in the
Gotta
summer.
have some wiggle room.
We gotta have a little wiggle room, so, you know, I know it's hard to say, trust us that we're gonna try to do always what's best for kids, and we'll bring you those class size numbers in the fall as we get going, and if you have a concern, you know, you say, Karen, what are you gonna cut in your budget that you can give us what we need, and I'll do it.
I just have two more questions, Dr. Woodford. There was mentioning of us just reversing things. So will the reversal of what we voted on include transfers as well?
Well, that's my question I was gonna ask the board.
Okay.
Direction on what do you want me to do tomorrow? Do you want me to contact parents and say that we're not going to do revocation? And then
So,
I'll start looking at what I need to do to plan and speak to principals, and so I
well,
think,
I would like to say that if we're going to do some reversing, then we certainly need to include the transfers. I think we need to, if we're going to reverse what we all voted on and agreed to, it needs to include that includes transfers, that we are going to go back to what we did before and reverse and revoke those letters that were sent out to our parents and students. It concerned me that we had 4th and 5th grade students who had been in an elementary school all those years, and to have them taken from the school or having to go to the school that they are zoned for, I have to admit that was very concerning to me. So if we're going to reverse, let's make sure we also include the transfers. And if I also can say this, and I promise I'm going to be quiet, but I think it's just my experience having worked as a building principal and a classroom teacher at the elementary level, that a school or a classroom is successful for, there's, to me, 1 or 2 key ingredients here, and that is that you have a good, strong teacher. You have a teacher or teachers that are committed, and they're willing to go that extra mile to ensure that the children are learning. And also they have to have that support. They have to have the resources. So Otter River, for that 1st grade classroom that we've been speaking of, they were successful because of the teachers and the parents. But they were also successful because there was support given to them. The help of that extra individual, that paraprofessional, made a difference. Okay, I promise I'm not going to say any more. I'm off my soapbox.
Check back with you in a little while.
Right.
Yes, Mr.
For
Elliott.
now.
I think it's important to be clear. We're not saying we're revoking, we're changing everything that has been decided. What we're telling you is we're giving you additional tools to go look at for each of these locations to see where we can include more students, based on the fact that we had capped you at 27 and that we had told you no to the multi-age classrooms based on certain locations. So I don't think the overall statement is we're reversing everything you've said and done. I think what we need to do is say we're taking a look at it and then put it publicly to let those parents know, hey, we may have a different option. However, caveat, change is coming. And so you can either change now while your child is in kindergarten or 1st grade, or it may happen to you in 4th grade. And that has to be the parent decision. But we can provide additional options to say, hey, based on what we are deciding tonight, you now have these options. That may help the 5th graders who are being moved. But I think it's imperative that we share with the parents, hey, 1st and 2nd grader, you may be able to stay this year, but it doesn't confirm that you're going to be able to stay 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I mean, it just changes. It's based on the amount of students that we have and the locations. But I think we owe it to our parents to be very clear. These are the options. However, you need to be aware they can quickly change next year. And that's for every school. I mean, there's no guarantees, but I don't want to publicly say that we're reversing everything that's been sent out, because that's not fair to the work that you guys have done based on what we instructed you to do. I think it's fair you've brought us options to say, hey, I think I can fix some of this, but you're not telling me you can fix all of it without just saying, well, we wasted how many months, and that's not fair. And it's the right thing to do for the students that are supposed to be at that school and in those classrooms. But, again, I want to welcome as many as we can at each school, but there comes a point where how are we successful? And that's what I'm turning over to you guys to say, okay, we're releasing some of this to allow you to do that, but we're absolutely not saying just forget about everything we've implemented and just let it ride. That's not fair to the students either.
And I think one of the things that we are keeping an internal waiting list, but it could be that, 3 or 4 kids move out, and then we have spots that we can offer right before school starts. And I know that feels like we're jerking kids around, but, we in our minds know that that's
Based on the conversations I've had with parents, they're telling me they just want to understand why the decisions we're making were made, point blank. Not just because the school board set the top number as 27. Well, how was that decision made at X elementary school?
Right.
That's what they're looking for. And I think as long as we can say that to them, and here's why we decided, here's what we're doing, you need to understand, though, it can change. That's what they're looking for, based on conversations I've had.
No, I said that I wasn't going to ask any more questions. So help me understand, what is it that we are changing and reversing? Because I'm not clear on that. So if someone could help District 5 representative better understand.
Sure. The adopted staffing standards in the operating budget, as was on one of the slides here, says that we will not exceed 27. And if we do, we have to add staff, and that we will not use any multi-age groupings. So what would be changing is we'd be removing that artificially determined 27. It could be 28, it could be 29. Not that we want it to be, not that we hope it will be, but it could be. In very few classrooms, public, we're talking very, 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 very few classrooms. And only when absolutely necessary, multi-age grouping. Then we can manage. And we'll do the work, we'll go back and we'll look at these 42 families and we'll look at these children, and we will do our level best to keep them where they are. And we'll stop approving waivers into these schools and into these grade levels where this problem has developed over years, because that policy has always been there. I don't need any action from the board to do that. That has always been the policy. We'll just start using it more effectively, and we'll be targeting schools where this has become problematic based on years of data. Moving forward, children that are in the school, we can accommodate in these other ways if we have that flexibility. So the only action I'd ask from the board tonight is to remove those lines from the staffing standard. Strike the cannot exceed 27 and strike that you cannot have multi-age groupings. If you strike those two things, we have more flexibility, we can deal with this. Does that address your question, ma'am?
So the transfers will explain to me again, how does the transfer, will there be a reversing of that?
We will go child by child, school by school, grade level by grade level, to determine if we can keep the waiver approved with this flexibility. That'll certainly be our intent. That'll certainly be our intent. If we can't, we'll be honest and direct with the parent why we can't.
And I'm sure, Dr. Bergen, you're going to provide the board with that information in terms of the number of students or transfer students that will be affected by it or will.
Certainly keep you informed.
I can just give you an example, like what Mark and I were looking at. I have a school that 4th grade is 27, 27, 28, and 5th grade is 27, 28.
I've heard from that school.
Yes.
Parents.
And so we were trying to say, and this school's already closed to zone transfers, but what if we get more kids? So we revoked it down to 25. If we had some flexibility, then we would look and say, we'll watch those numbers and we'll say, all right, well, maybe that's okay. They have the resources. We talked to the principal. They feel comfortable with that. We can make this work. And we come up with a plan, and then we say, kids, you can come back. We have a lot of extra kids because we were trying to get to that 25 number to give us wiggle room. So I think in most cases, we can make it work. I don't want to promise 100% because, you know, I've been looking at the opposite for, you know, a couple months. But again, I think Dr. Bergen said it best. If we can just have the flexibility, let us see what we can do. And if we're having an issue, we will let you know.
I promise.
Well, think about going last. One, I was getting a little antsy. It's hard to wait till last this time. I want to start off with a general statement. As everyone knows, I've been on this board for quite a while. I'm working on my 8th year. But I've been involved with the schools 10 or 11 years now. I got involved with the school closures about 10 or 11 years ago. And honestly, if we had kept Body Camp and Thaxton open to begin with, we wouldn't have overcrowding at Moneta and Bedford Elementary School, period. But with that being said, couple of questions, if you don't mind, Dr. Woodford. The total revocations that you presented to us, does that include the transfers that we allow because the teacher is at that school?
Based on the regulation, that was the last revocations we would do. So we looked at if the teacher taught in that school, if we could help it, we did not revoke, and we didn't have an instance where we had to do a revocation for a teacher in the school. We do have 2 situations where we have employees who are in another school, who have kids in an elementary school that are kind of on our list of we might have to talk to them about could their kids go somewhere else or go back to their home school. There's always potential for that, especially in our smaller schools because we don't have as many zone transfers. But right now, we don't have any on the list that we revoked, and we have 2 on standby that we kind of stopped on until we could see if the numbers work themselves out.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about the blended classrooms. Again, I've been in this fight for quite a while, and I've heard over the years, parents don't like the blended classrooms. It's not a favorite. So would that be a last resort to go to that if need be? Or, I mean, that's kind of like a last resort if we have to do that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it would be multi-age groupings before classrooms. I mean, there's a difference. A multi-age classroom is children of 2 different grade levels spending the entire 7 hours together. Multi-age grouping is in a very targeted way for a portion of the day, removing some number of children and placing them with other children who have similar needs for reading and math instruction. That's what we would use. We would use groupings, not classrooms.
And you said that, and I agree with you. Like I said, I've been looking at these numbers for many years as well. Mr. Blankenship is usually spot on with his numbers. How far are we below right now on our kindergarten projections?
Ooh, I could, that would
Can-
take a
can-
little
can you let me know?
calculation.
But we are right low as opposed to what the projection is.
We are low, and in some of those schools, because Mr. Blankenship does it a lot, We have a couple of schools that we're surprised about, and then we have a couple that we know those kids are they're gonna flock in as soon as they see back to school night. We're gonna get them outside the door. So I think they will come up, which is why we haven't done a lot with kindergarten. We're watching those numbers. We also did not approve any new zone transfers in any of the grade levels we had concerns about that we identified 2 months ago. We didn't bring anybody new in. We said we're not going to bring them in and then tell them they can't be there. So we also have certain grade levels that we've closed internally to zone transfers.
And from what I'm gathering here with what's presented, you're not just asking for the flexibility to do the multi-level, but to do exactly what you need to get everything done, whether it's
I'm really asking
whether
for
it's
the
shifting teachers around or,
Right.
yeah, so you're asking
Yeah.
for the flexibility, period, and that's just not limited to the multi-level.
Right. I'm just
Okay.
asking for flexibility to do what we've really been doing for the last few years, looking at resources and trying to make things work the best for the kids and schools.
And I will say that the parents I'm hearing from, they want their kids to stay where they are. And I understand as being of course, my kids were in elementary school and being young enough to have to worry about childcare, especially with wait lists in daycares right now. It's hard, and it's kind of a late time to be able to come up with backup daycare. So the parents that the ones I've heard from would like for us to revoke the revocation, for lack of a better way of saying it, to allow their kids to go to school. Now, procedurally, here's another one. We are not accepting any more zone transfers into these schools at this point. I mean, I know we've closed, we're pulling them out. But if that were to be overturned by any reason, we will not accept any more. Is that correct?
So there are some schools that are closed to zone transfers anyway. And then the schools that are not, if the grade levels were problematic, we did not accept any. For instance, if we were revoking at third grade at Manita, if we had a zone transfer request for a first-time transfer in, we denied that. So we didn't let anybody new come into grade levels that were problematic. We did not do that for grade levels that were low. We have allowed those zone transfers in. Now, we can do whatever the board wishes if you want us to.
Well, we have I'm not asking for any action for the board on whether or not we should approve or not approve more waivers. The policy already clearly states that if it's problematic at a grade level, we disclose it to new waivers. We'll do that. We've been doing that. We'll continue to do that. Where we have room, we'll allow for additional waivers because it's always been the policy of this county to allow parents to pick. It's not true in other counties. That's somewhat unique for Bedford County that you can pick the school you want your child to attend, and we're certainly supportive of that when there's room. So in these very particular situations that we've spent so much time analyzing, and there have been just countless hours by Mr. Blankenship and Dr. Woodford and others in coming up with this data, no new waivers into these situations. And with this flexibility, we're going to do our level best to not have to revoke the waivers for the 42 children with whom we've already communicated. I think that is the question maybe you're all trying to drive at is, can we as administration reverse course on the 42? Yes, we think so. This is a fluid conversation if we have some more flexibility. And the flexibility would be remove the hard number of 27, meaning we could have classrooms of 28 and 29, and will. Dr. Woodford just gave an example where we have 28 children in 2 different grade levels in one particular school. There's going to be other situations like that. And if we have the flexibility in working with the principal and the teachers to consider if multi-age grouping would be appropriate and helpful. Because under the currently adopted standards, that is not permissible. That's what has driven us to where we are.
Another statement is that I've ran on, and I'm here on the premise of wanting smaller classrooms for our kids. I think that's what's best for them, to be able to have more individualized attention from the teacher. And with all of the numbers of zone transfers we have flying around, I think in the future, for a couple of years, it would be good if we closed all the schools down to zone transfers, and to see what their real numbers are for a couple of years, just to see where we are standing and what we can do. And I don't think that we should take any more kids in by zone transfers and let that start. But I do think that the ones that are here in a zone transfer at Otter River, at Manita, at Huddleston, at Bedford Elementary, they should be grandfathered in and let them finish their elementary school term out, because we are not in any danger of hitting overcrowding in our middle schools. So let them go ahead and finish out elementary schools and then move on to middle school, and then start taking action with the upcoming kindergarten class, is what I would like to see. But right now, from the number of parents that we've heard from, I believe that we need to do something to help everyone out. And procedurally, since it was a unanimous vote, anyone can bring up a motion. However, this is not, our normal procedure is that we hear something one month and then we vote on it the next month. This is being presented to us tonight as an informational item or a staff report, which is what I asked for, which I knew we had to do. So if we want to take an action on this tonight, then I would need someone to make a motion that we suspend the rule to wait a month to vote first and foremost. If anyone wants to move forward with a potential action, I need that motion.
Just to be clear, just make a motion that says we waive the 1 month requirement, and then someone can make a motion on whatever that is.
Right.
Okay,
Madam
Madam Chair, I make
Chair.
a motion.
Sorry. It was me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
If I could just add to that, yes, Mr. Daniels, that's correct, but I would also suggest in the motion, when you make the motion to waive the 2-month cycle for the purpose of, and state exactly what your, the item that you are waiving it for. Does that make sense?
For the staffing standards.
Yes, staff, yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to try to get through this. Madam Chair, I make a motion that we suspend the 2-month waiting period from informational to action in regards to adjusting the staffing standards that we've agreed to.
I have a motion by Mr. Daniels to suspend our rule. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Holbrook. Any discussion on this? Okay, no discussion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Now, Mr. Daniels, since your motion specified for staffing standards, do I have a motion regarding the current staffing standards?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we leave the standards as they are, with the exception of, the policy as it is written, with the exception of removing the cap and allowing staff to adjust that up to the standards of quality as needed, and to allow multi-aging classroom. However, I want to make sure we're just changing that. So those are the only two things that I'm recommending. I'm not saying that we're removing the revoking of transfers. That is for staff to determine. So I'm only making a recommendation that we remove the cap and the multi-aging classroom.
I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Daniels. Okay, now discussion. I have one thing to piggyback off of that. The revocations were issued at our discretion, so, or because of our standards. Do you need direction from us to be able to revoke those revocations? Or can you just revoke those with us removing the cap?
Administratively, without the burden of 27 and no multi-age grouping, we can be more flexible. I am not going to make any assurances that that doesn't mean that we're not going to have to revoke some transfer somewhere, and I'm not going to make any assurances that we can grandfather children in for the next 6 years because they're in a school right now.
That wasn't
Because
part of
things
my-
change. And that was not part of the motion, and I'm just echoing that. So I feel confident that we can address most, if not all, of the 42 revocations with this flexibility. For now, I can make no predictions beyond tonight because things change. You know, we talked about some kids haven't registered and a minivan could pull up, you know, in front of one of these schools and it's just going to throw us. But if we have some more flexibility, we'll go back and we'll communicate with these 42 families about what our options are with this additional flexibility.
So the ones that have received revocation with this motion as it's presented, then those parents that have received the notices will have those drawn back.
We'll re-communicate with them about what our options are. And
Maybe not all.
if we can rescind the revocation, we certainly will. I can't assure you tonight that I'll be able to do that, but with this additional flexibility, that'll certainly be our intent.
Further discussion?
Well, I do want to make one comment. I do find it concerning that we cannot state that we will include the transfers and that we will just allow those children for this year to certainly continue at the school that they've been attending. I certainly think that that is something that many of our parents, I've heard from them, you guys have heard from them as well, that they are greatly concerned. And so that's part of the concern. That's why we're here. That's why we're discussing this. And I think it needs to have a little bit more clarity for our parents. But the motion's on the floor, so that's my comment.
Further comments? Okay, well, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No?
Okay, Ms. Johnson, will you poll the board?
Mr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Hairston?
No?
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Holbrook?
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Nelms?
Yes.
The ayes have it with 5, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, now, another question. We're item 3.02, end-of-year data for PALS and VK-RP. We have 10 minutes till dinner. How long?
I can do it.
Okay. I have faith in you. I have faith in you. Okay, Dr. Bergen, 3.02.
I am not going to take any of those 10 minutes. Dr.
Okay.
Dr. Woodford has a presentation that is available to the public and to the board members, and I'm going to ask her to go through this data. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board again. Tonight I'm going to just share some end-of-the-year results for our elementary students on 2 screening assessments given in the fall and spring. I want to just tell you that a screening tool is only used to identify students who are at risk of needing additional support throughout the year, so that hopefully we can identify them quickly for remediation instead of waiting several weeks or to the end of 9 weeks before we start intervention. A screening tool is just that. It's an early warning system for student difficulties. It's not a cumulative score given at the end of a year like an SOL test. It's not necessarily a tool that gives us achievement data. The best way to compare that data is really to look at cohort performance over time, or simply from where that student starts to where they end in the spring. So with that being said, I want to look at our first tool, which is the PAL screener, also known as the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening. This screening test is used to identify students at risk of reading difficulties. These assessments are designed to measure students' knowledge of important literacy fundamentals and can be used to provide teachers with information to help guide their teaching and interventions with volunteers or remediation staff or reading specialists. Schools in Virginia have been using this screening tool since the fall of 2000 in grades K through 3, and then we added PALS 4 or 5, or we call it PALS Plus, later. All of the PALS materials and screeners were retired on June 30th of this year, and the Virginia Literacy Partnership Project will release a new screener that aligns with the new initiative, the Virginia Literacy Initiative and Science of Reading in the fall. At this time, we don't have any more information about what that screener will look like, but we do know training will be required, and then our data may look different next year. So this slide just shows the percentage of students meeting the established benchmarks in each grade level in the fall and in the spring. The benchmarks for each assessment change from fall to spring based on the difficulty expected at that grade level at that time. Obviously, we expect more skills in a first grader when they're leaving first grade and going to second grade than when they first enter first grade. So the benchmarks change. You can see here that our kindergarten, we had a good improvement from fall to the spring. We had more students meet the benchmark. Same at first, same at second, same at third, and same at fifth. We did have a drop in the in the fourth grade benchmarks and the percentage of students meeting that benchmark. However, when I compare that to the students who actually met the SOL benchmark and the SOL pass rate, they met the SOL pass rates. So they performed much better in the actual achievement test portion than they did on the PALS data. That could be because our fourth graders had a lot of SOL tests, and at the same time we were doing PALS testing. They could just be weary of testing. But I think it's important that they did do well on their SOL test. Specifically, I looked at schools that had low fourth grade scores on PALS. All of those schools met the fourth grade reading benchmark on their SOL or exceeded it. So that was encouraging news. As I said, this is a screening tool, so data for cohorts is really a better indicator of their improvement over time. So I've provided some cohort group results and really trying to get 5 years of data. I started looking at the cohort that started school in 2017-18. And then I really tracked the percentage of students meeting the benchmarks at the end of the year at each of those grade levels. So for example, you can see here, the kindergartners who began school in 2017 had 89% of the students meeting the spring benchmark. In the first grade, as you move to the right in the chart, 85% of them met the benchmark. In second grade, they did not have PALS scores because that was the year school closed. In the third grade, we had 78%, a rise at 82, and then fifth grade, 74. I do think that what we see in the pattern here of our cohort data, we do see the effects of the spring of 2020 to the spring of 2021 when school just looked different. We shut schools down at the end of the 2020 school year, and then we had a very different model in 2021. So it does show us that our cohorts do continue to keep working. They're trying to build that learning loss. But I will say I'm really excited to see the number of students coming into kindergarten meeting benchmarks. That means that our preschool programs, we're back on track, we're getting our kids stronger, and we still need to focus our resources in gaining some of that learning loss with our older students. Our next group of data is the VKRP. The Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, it's given to our preschoolers and kindergartners every year. It's only for kindergarten and preschool. It builds on a more comprehensive understanding of school readiness and success, and it looks really at 3 areas: math readiness, self-regulation readiness, and social skill readiness. The last two sections, the self-regulation and the social skills, are scores that are given through teacher rating scales for each student on skills they feel students have mastered. That can sometimes be a little difficult when teachers are just meeting kindergartners for the first time and they're trying to rate them where they are on regulation and social skills. So I do think that we have to remember that when we're looking at the data here. This year, our kindergartners in math improved 1% from the fall to the spring. Self-regulation skills stayed the same, and social skills dropped 2 percentage points. When we look a little bit deeper into that data, what we do notice is that the math section of VKRP, it has 4 subsections: geometry, patterning, numeracy, and computation. Where we have a significant concern is that numeracy subsection. Geometry, patterning, computation, they're looking fairly solid in the percent of students passing those, but we see a definite deficit in numeracy, and that dropped. So what are we doing about that? We're doing just like we're doing with the SOL test, as Dr. Trosper shared earlier this summer. We're conducting a root cause analysis of factors impacting student scores. The math skills expected at the end of the kindergarten year in VKRP have to be the focus of instruction all year. And so we are looking at our pacing guides to ensure that even though we're doing really well with patterns and shapes and computation, we have to address those numeracy skills much earlier in the year and continue that being a focus. Really focusing on higher level skills of understanding the relationship between numbers, training for our kindergarten teachers on how to focus on that, and using the resources that are provided from the VKRP office when they're planning and instructing our students. Also, in PALS, we're identifying the reading skills that need to be worked on. And our real focus this year is fidelity to that brand new reading curriculum with Benchmark Advanced that we just purchased. We've already done training for teachers. We're going to do new training for our newer teachers using that curriculum. And we believe that that focus will help us get on track with our reading. We also have done principal training on how to use data to improve student outcomes. These tools give us the best window to see what students will most likely struggle with in schools. However, sometimes we only look at just the high-level data. We look at the score. So we spent time within our leadership conferences. How do you look deeper at your data so that we can move our students forward? We're also implementing a new math intervention tool at the elementary level for struggling students, especially for our students with disabilities. We implemented a reading program last year that had a lot of success, and we're coming in this year with a math intervention so that when we're doing remediation, we have a strong program. We also have been focusing with our principals and administrators and leaders on continuous school improvement. Our theme this summer was focusing on best practices to improve outcomes for all students. Really, our message was the pandemic can no longer be our crutch. We have an expectation, we have a duty to our students to keep moving forward and get better and better and better. So what are our long-range goals, where are we going, and how are we going to get there? We also are working this summer developing a division-wide writing plan, which is really important because the state is moving to writing that's embedded in reading skills. So how do we build comprehension? How do we connect phonics instruction to grapheme production? How do we get our students analyzing text? So our writing plan is really focused on that, which will improve our reading comprehension. So I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was fast, but.
Time to discuss it when we get back.
Okay.
Just to have some questions.
Because I do have some questions.
Okay, so we will go ahead and break for dinner, then pick up with the question portion of 3.02 when we return.
Perfect.
Okay? We'll go ahead and adjourn for dinner. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene this regular scheduled school board meeting for Bedford County Public Schools for July the 13th, 2023. If you would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if you would please, I would ask that you join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of Faye Craighead, who is a former teacher, principal, assistant principal at various schools within Bedford County Public Schools. And for Sierra Sharpenter, she was a teacher at Forest Middle School. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 6.03, recognition of students and staff.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could kick off before we invite some of the students up onto the stage per usual. We do have some administrators who are new to the school division, and it has been our tradition to introduce these new administrators to you. So these individuals have started over the past weeks or months, but I've just not had a chance to introduce them to the community and to you. So we'll start with Kristen Borak. And there she is. Of course, you all have come to know Kristen, her role here in the school board meetings. Kristen has been with Bedford County since April of this year, and she serves as our coordinator of communications and community engagement. She is a West Virginia native and a Marshall University alum. She came to us with many years of experience in communications and in public relations, mostly with law enforcement, but she's transitioned, and those are transferable skills that she's now able using to the benefit of our students, staff, and community. She's the mother of an almost 7-year-old, and you know when you're almost 7, it's important that you throw that in, named Scarlett, and a golden retriever named Frank. I haven't met Frank yet, but welcome, Kristen. We're glad to have you. Toby Ackman over here to my left. Toby is our supervisor of employee relations and compliance, and he is happy to be back home right here in Bedford County Public Schools. He's originally from South Dakota. Toby was previously with Bedford for 7 years. He and his wife have 2 daughters that attend, one at Forest Middle and one at Jefferson Forest High School, and he is a very proud and active father with his daughters heavily involved in dance and volleyball. Toby is a graduate of South Dakota University, Minnesota State University, and Lynchburg College. He began his career in education 20 years ago as a school counselor, 5 years at Jefferson Forest High School, before becoming the assistant principal of Brookville Middle School and most recently as principal of Tomahawk Elementary School. So we're happy to steal him and bring him back home to work right here in the community where he lives and he has children attending schools. Toby, Supervisor of Employee Relations and Compliance. Welcome, Toby. And finally, we have Dr. Jeffrey Guerin. He's just up the aisle here. Dr. Guerin is our newest principal, and he is assigned to Huddleston Elementary School. He has been in public education for 10 years, most recently as principal in Lynchburg City Schools of T.C. Miller. In addition to his administrative experience, Dr. Guerin has also worked in special education programs. He is a 3-time Liberty University alum for undergraduate, graduate, and doctorate degrees, and he's a lifelong Bills fan? I was going to say that's a painful journey to road to hoe. But he's a lifelong Bills fan since that's where he lived prior to attending Liberty University. In his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his wife and his 2 sons, as well as home renovation projects. Welcome to you. Dr. Guerin, you also live right here in Bedford County, is that correct? just happy to have him back home too, teaching and living and working and serving in the community where he and his wife live. So welcome, Dr. Guerin. And with those two introductions, I would like now to transition to our usual, and we have some students that we'd like to recognize for their accomplishments. I'll turn it over to Kristen.
All right. Our first student being recognized tonight is Mobu Wakor from Jefferson Forest High School for his second place finish for triple jump in the state track competition. Oh, I'm sorry. That's.
We're getting there.
I'll get it right one day.
So,
All right. And then Dr. Cornett's going to take your picture. All right. Congratulations. Our next three students are a part of the Cavalier Theater and are being recognized for their success at the Virginia High School League Film Festival. First up is Bridget Spannenberg from Jefferson Forest High School. Bridget won first place in the commercial category for their production titled Good. Next up is Sarah Lynn Laux and Carter Rice from Jefferson Forest High School for winning second place in the experimental category for their production of the alphabet game. All right, can we get you all to squeeze together and Dr. Cornett will get you a picture? Congratulations to you all. We're proud of the work you're creating.
Congratulations.
Our next recognition is for Forest Elementary School. Principal Lori Manley is here to accept their certificate for receiving the 2022 to 2023 Highest Achievement Exemplar Award from the Virginia Department of Education. There are only 48 schools across the Commonwealth that receive this recognition. This is a great achievement for Forest Elementary. The hard work of the staff and dedication to their students show in this award. Congratulations.
congratulations, everyone. Okay, moving on to the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. The public comment portion of tonight's agenda is limited to 40 minutes. Speakers are asked to state their name and voting district. The school board is here to listen to your comments but will not engage or respond to speakers during this 40-minute period. Please remember that this is a public meeting and that we expect all speakers to refrain from any foul, profane, abusive, or hateful language during their comments or at any time while in attendance of this meeting. We also ask that speakers keep their remarks objective and about the school in nature. Please keep all comments limited to matters related to the public schools, and any comments that are harassing or amount to personal attack against any identifiable individual, whether board member or staff or student, or having the potential to cause unnecessary delay or disruption to this meeting are prohibited. This is a public meeting for public matters. If a speaker is not present when their name is called, we will proceed with the next name listed on the list. An individual who is not signed up to speak may not substitute for that time slot. Individuals will have 4 minutes to address the board. An alarm will sound when an individual has 30 seconds remaining, and a second alarm will sound when the allotted 4 minutes have expired. When the second alarm sounds, please discontinue speaking and allow the next person in line to come to the podium. Should you be unable to finish your comments, please send or give them to Mrs. Johnson, and she will give them to board members. Also, we ask that you please do not adjust the microphone at the podium, as it has been positioned for optimum audio quality. Our first speaker tonight is Jamison Strasburg.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Jamison Strasburg. I teach at Jefferson Forest High School. I'm coming before you tonight to speak about paraprofessional pay. Bedford County Schools has a problem rooted in false hope and empty promises, a problem which ultimately fails our most important stakeholder, our students. The division touts a vision of bringing and retaining the best and brightest to Bedford, but that promise does not extend to our classified employees. As a classroom teacher who has spent the bulk of my career working with paras, sometimes two, in every single classroom for many years, I know the importance of these employees with one-on-one help that they provide, yet we compensate this staff below the state average of $19 per hour. As I researched my remarks, paras in this division have been promised significant pay raises for over a decade with no result. I've heard these promises firsthand at the end of the 21-22 school year during the Meet with Central sessions in our building, and they spoke abundantly about pay scales and restorations of steps. We were told SPED paras had to wait until 23-24. Here it is, 23-24, with nothing, except for COLA. Again, another year, more false promises. Paras are leaving in droves. Who is the ultimate victim? Our students. When pushed, I was told there are fringe benefits. In this economy, what are those benefits? Not being able to afford gasoline to get to work, to afford food, to afford the $3,000 deductibles per family member our insurance provides, to afford AEP's ridiculous energy rates after this winter. To me, it seems the only benefit remains are zone transfers, yet those are being denied due to numbers. Why are these employees not being compensated fairly when they spend the most one-on-one time with our students with highest needs, more than us, the subject matter teacher, sometimes more than the case manager? Without adequate pay, these vacancies will remain unstaffed and unfilled. Students will fall through the cracks. Needs will go unmet. Frustration levels will rise with students, teachers, and parents alike. When pushed as to why these employees are paid so little, we've been met with the same answers. They work 192 days. So do we. They get insurance. They can seek extra employment. That's not possible for secondary paras that have children of their own. Now, the students our paras serve, they can work part-time and make more than our paras, sometimes $5 to $7 an hour more. I have a student today that works at Mr. Goody's making $18 an hour. How fair is that? Our paras hourly make $13.39 when their own students make more than they do. And those kids don't have bills to pay. Those kids don't need a livable wage at this time. Principals are electing to forego filling para positions in favor of hiring more special education teachers. But as a classroom teacher of 17 years, this helps teachers, not students. It reduces caseloads. It helps maximize IEP writing and IEP meetings. It does not ease the load in the classroom. It doesn't help with the actual implementation of the accommodations that these students need daily. Paraprofessionals deserve to be paid what they are worth so we can retain quality employees and provide the best for our students. Now, please consider in the next budget cycle finally increasing para pay. Thank you.
Ms. Strasburg. Joanna Strasburg.
Members of the school board, Dr. Bergen, my name is Joanna Strasburg. I'm a special education paraprofessional at Jefferson Forest High School. Working with special needs students has been the most rewarding and challenging role of my life, and it's a job I look forward to every day. This evening, I'd like to address the issue of fair compensation. Yes, it's true that I currently earn less than $20,000 per year, which is barely over the minimum wage. To put things in perspective, my 19-year-old son earned above this hourly wage working as a cashier at Food Lion. Baristas at Starbucks earn between $15 to $17 per hour. Walmart cashiers start out at approximately $16 per hour. Even Bedford County Schools substitute teachers make more per hour than I do. I don't even make enough to have federal taxes taken out of my paychecks, causing a nightmare at tax time. However, I'm not here to complain because I do really love my job. Why do I do it? Why did I sign my contract knowing that we as SPED paraprofessionals were once again passed over for a significant pay increase? Why do I volunteer my time? Why do I go above and beyond every day? It's because I truly care about our SPED students and I work with the most wonderful people. Let me shed light on the vital role that we play as special education paraprofessionals. We provide educational support to special needs students, implementing accommodations outlined in their IEPs. Our responsibilities range from supervising small group testing, scribing, and test reading, and to assisting with daily tasks and offering social and emotional support. We are the ones who encourage our students to pursue their dreams. We are who they count on. We are the ones they trust. We greet them in the hallway with smiles and encouragement. We create special bonds and build lasting relationships, and so much more. I'm fortunate to work with the most amazing team of dedicated individuals, each contributing their unique strengths, from tutoring students in math to organizing schedules to attending outings. We go above and beyond every day. As a Titanic historian, I sponsored a shipwreck club last school year, where both general and special education students explored shipwrecks worldwide through virtual sessions with renowned experts. Even when faced with challenges every day, we persevere. We volunteer our time for graduation, after-school events, sports events, proms, wherever a presence could provide support to our SPED students. We're frequently short-handed, however, we work together to make things work, no matter what. Throughout my over 25-year career, I have held diverse positions ranging from office manager to stay-at-home mom. I have worked in various industries, gaining experience in fields such as food, retail, dentistry, physical therapy, and life insurance. I have also been an editor and published articles in European magazines. Although I lack fancy degrees, I do take pride in graduating from a business college in 1998, which Human Resources refuses to recognize. What matters most, though, is my experience and my unwavering dedication. This is not just a job for me, it's personal. I have a son who is on the autism spectrum, and he's about to begin his sophomore year at UVA. He was also just hired by a government contracting agency. I know he is the man that he is today, partly because I wouldn't give up on him, and also because of an amazing educational team, including exceptional paraprofessionals. I am inspired by him every day, and I want to be that person who makes a difference in someone's life. I'm not unique. There are qualified, dedicated, hardworking SPED paras employed all throughout Bedford County. I'm sure they are struggling in this current economic climate just like I am. My coworkers and I have reached out to Human Resources before with no recourse. Basically, our low salaries are justified because we only work 192 days a year, and our position was never meant to sustain us financially. New hires are being paid a higher rate than those employees who have been employed for years. In conclusion, I urge you to recognize our invaluable contributions and address the issue of fair compensation. Our wages to reflect our dedication, responsibilities, and experience, not how many days a year that we work. By investing in us, you invest in the education and well-being of our special needs students. Together, let us work towards a future where we can all live with. Special education paraprofessionals of Bedford County deserve a livable wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strasburg. Dave Dietrich.
Good evening, I'm Dave Dietrich from the 4th. June's school board meeting was an eye-opener. We witnessed yet again the methods of special interest. We saw more clearly the division in educational philosophy among school board members and administration. Finally, we got to see further hints of what kind of education our youth are receiving. Special interest appeared in the form of advocates for claimed oppressed groups. Truth, dispassionate reason, and scientifically based empirical evidence were absent from the discourse. Yet emotionally driven comments, certain self-righteousness, and illogic were evident throughout. There were several breaches of informal logic, appeals to pity and fear, ad hominem attacks, cherry-picking facts, and hasty generalizations. At no time was a reasonable case made as to why special interest views on social justice should be institutionalized. How would this even improve learning? Differing views of certain school board members and administrators were also evident. Support for special interest by some seemed in opposition to pro-student, pro-parent, and pro-community positions held by others. Lastly, we got glimpses of what kind of education our youth are receiving. The first was apparent in the comment made regarding the ancient Greeks. It is true that Greek society was highly stratified, with only wealthy and learned males able to participate in democracy. But history must always be studied in proper context, especially the context of the times. Such a limited ancient Greek democracy was present at a time when the rest of the world, save for periods of republican Rome, knew only absolute rule and crushing tyranny. Thus, ancient Greece is not condemnation of Western tradition. It is prima facie evidence of its liberative uniqueness and humanity. Another glimpse at the education our youth are receiving was indicated by the awards given for outstanding student scholarship achievement. The hard work and superb quality of erudition by these students should be fully recognized, commended, and emulated. Yet some of the subject matter seemed to reflect a theme of social justice. That seemed to track an institutionalized educational bias that social justice will transform the world. So the problem does not rest with our exemplary students. Neither does it probably rest with most teachers and administrators. The problem is systemic. The problem is top-down curriculum design that favors so-called social justice. Discovery of truth, virtue, avoidance of vice, and recognition of God-given natural law and natural rights are now irrelevant. Yet what our students learn and how they learn are critical to our future as a nation, as a people, and to our continued liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dietrich. Crystal Jones. Crystal Jones. Richard Chumley. Richard Chumley. Jess Lloyd.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm from District 6. My name is Jess Lloyd, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and husband, Stevie Ray Lloyd, in regards to our rising third grader at Manita Elementary who has just had his zone transfer revoked due to a capacity reasoning. We live 5 minutes from Stanton River Middle and High School and are zoned for Liberty High School, which is 25 minutes away. Our road is the cutoff. We chose to start our oldest at Manita Elementary, knowing that's what would be best for the future of our family. And ultimately, what made the most sense. Never in a million years did I think we would run into a capacity issue in the Stanton River District and be revoked. As Mr. Blankenship stated this week, this has never happened before. And based on all the information I've learned over the last few days, it hasn't happened because it shouldn't ever happen. My first area of concern with this careless decision that has so easily been made is when was the social emotional well-being of these 42 kids taken into consideration? For my third grader, this is supposed to be a critical transition year and academically rigorous. Uprooting him from the school he has been at since kindergarten is not going to help him socially or emotionally in any way. In fact, I have not even had the heart to tell him what is going on, because I know he will be devastated, and I will not understand why this wonderful third grade group has been targeted. This decision not only affects the social emotional well-being of the students receiving the revoke, but also the remaining students who have tight bonds with these students. These revokees were leaders in the classroom, setting the standard of hard work and always pushing to be their best, and pushing everybody else to be their best, not to mention students who devoted themselves to being inclusive to all the different types of students in that class. SOLs start for these third graders this year. Removing them from the learning environment they are most comfortable in makes zero sense for the future success on these tests. Once again, I ask, did anyone stop and think about the children when making this decision? This decision the board has made for Manita Elementary is not a school capacity issue, which is stated in fine print for possible reasons to revoke, but it is a quick fix to an ongoing budget issue. Manita Elementary is not at capacity, and there should in fact always be 2 teachers allotted in your budget for each class. This would be a solution that benefits everyone involved. These third graders are your COVID babies. They started school in the COVID mess, and they all got through it together. Now I have to reference back again to mental health and how important it is moving forward for these third graders to receive consistency of learning. They don't deserve any more disruptions within their education. Your decision does not aid in this at all. I have 4 kids. I'm going to make it short here. What does this look like for all the ones? I have a second grader going into third. What does it look like for the third going into fourth? What does this look like for our family in the future? The quick fix to the budget issue could be the start of this new revoking trend. I just ask that you all really stop and relook at this and start making a plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Brittany Bauer.
Good evening. My name is Brittany Bauer, and I'm a member of District 2. I'm here tonight to speak on an issue that was discussed earlier this evening and has happened at Manita Elementary, specifically third grade. I found it outlandish that it was deemed a good idea that revoking student zone transfers to squeeze as many students as possible in one classroom appropriate in a school that is already under capacity, instead of taking the time to actually speak up for them and create a plan to reallocate teachers or bring in additional help. As parents, we have heard over and over that the social and emotional well-being and mental health of our children are the top priority for Bedford County. Tell me how removing established students and having them start over at a new school disrupting their education is what's best for their social and emotional well-being. Most of these select students have been at the same school since kindergarten, learning to navigate school together in the fall of 2020 during the COVID pandemic, and have yet to have a normal school year due to changes in rules and regulations put on this group every single year. They're deemed the COVID babies, and this group has always been targeted with issues and unreliable fixes to get them through the school year, which in turn has caused complete chaos in their lives due to a budget agenda. Did anyone on the board consider that this decision would be more detrimental to these students, or was money the only thing at the forefront of the discussion? We are a month out from school starting. Kids are getting excited to see their friends and familiar teacher faces. Put yourself in these parents' positions of having to tell them they aren't allowed to go to the only school they've ever known anymore. Think about the parents who have siblings separated because one got lucky enough to have the correct number of students in their grade, so their transfer was not revoked. Think about the families that live closer to Manita than their actual zone school and chose Manita for that reason. Think about the children attending Manita for childcare reasons, and now this decision puts their parents in the predicament of having to choose between work and their child's education. I understand money is important and has to be reviewed, but when did it become more important than the students of Bedford County? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer. Carrie Davis.
Hello, my name is Carrie Davis. I'm a member of District 1. I came to talk tonight about my son's zone transfer being revoked at Manita Elementary. He will be going into the 3rd grade and has attended Manita since kindergarten. My family has had a zone issue in the past when we lived in Bedford and my daughter was approved to attend Otter River due to the babysitter living in that zone. Fast forward a couple years, my daughter was entering 3rd grade and my son into kindergarten, but his zone request was denied due to capacity issues in the future, even with having a sibling already at the school. 2 months after school had begun, the policy had changed and siblings were grandfathered in if they already had a sibling in the school. But that was 2 months too late for us. I've already disrupted one of my children to change schools. I won't do it again. My husband and I have always wanted our children to attend small schools, so since Otter River didn't work out, we decided on Manita. We had discussed moving there in the next couple of years anyways. Both kids were approved and my daughter started 3rd grade and my son kindergarten. Now here we are going into 4 years later dealing with another zone issue. We do live in Manita now and have a Manita address, but our house is right on the line for Manita and Goodview. We fall into the Goodview zone. We live about 10 minutes from Manita Elementary and almost 20 from Goodview. We are 1 mile from the cutoff line. I don't see how it makes sense to pull my son from a school nowhere close to capacity and send him to a much larger school where he turns into a number instead of an individual. My son's class has always required 2 teachers per grade in years past, and now all of a sudden it becomes an issue with having 2 teachers once they hit 3rd grade. Not only is this affecting the zone transfer kids who are expected to just start over during this important year, but it leaves the other 27 kids with 1 teacher who is now responsible for getting all 27 kids ready for SOLs on their own. It's clear to me that the children's mental and emotional well-being were not considered when this decision was made, and you are doing a huge disservice to them and their education. Since when do we put money first and children's education second? Someone told me over the past couple days that our kids will be okay if they are revoked because they have parents like us fighting for them. And although I understand and appreciate that, my son shouldn't just have to be okay. He should be happy and excited to return to the school that he has only ever known and begin his 4th year with his best friends and familiar faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I have 4 open slots left. Would anyone else like to speak this evening? Okay, seeing no one, I will close public comment portion of tonight's meeting. Moving on to item 7, approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Nelms. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Picking up with staff reports, we're going to pick up with the questions to be asked on 3.02, and I had Mr. Hill and Ms. Hairston both wanting questions. I believe I saw Mr. Hill first, if I'm remembering correctly. So, Mr. Hill?
Yeah. So, Dr. Woodford, you mentioned training had been taking place this summer. What percentage of your staff that was asked to take that training has completed it?
We offered, or we mandated that training on the teacher workday, the last 2 teacher workdays, and 100% of the teachers who were there on that day were in the trainings.
Okay. So what percentage does that leave that has not taken the training that were not there on those 2 days?
I'm not sure. We've set up the training for brand new teachers, and I'm not sure right now how many that will be. And I mean, I can get that information to you. I don't know that I know it.
All I'm concerned about is that you will promise me that 100% of your teachers, if it's a mandated training,
Absolutely.
that it will be completed before students enter our buildings.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, sorry, I got to go back. It's been 30 minutes or an hour. The root cause analysis for factors that impact student scores. I'm assuming you guys have not started that, or you have and you're not ready to start sharing that information?
We have, our instructional supervisors have been looking at, correlating math SOL data with VKRP, with SOLs. And we can probably give you a much more detailed, we know that we needed a reading intervention program. We also purchased a summer school program for elementary school so that we had targeted, specific math and reading interventions that I think our summer school teachers have really enjoyed because it kind of took some guesswork out. And so our goal has been to have programs with fidelity that, meet the skills that we're struggling in. We definitely have some subgroups we're concerned about with our special education population, and I know that Mrs. Jennings' team, they have purchased this summer a math intervention program to target some specific skills. I can give you a more detailed data analysis if that's what you're looking for, specific.
Here's what and again, thank you for the information you put together. So I want to make sure we have details going forward of, hey, after our root cause analysis, these were the top 5 things we identified. Here's the top 2 to 3 things of those 5 things that we identified that we're going to go attack or approach. And here, bottom line, and Dr. Bergen's going to get tired of me saying this, but it's all about results.
Right.
And so what you're implementing based on your root cause analysis, I want to understand what you're doing and what you need from us to go implement it. And then if we're seeing results, great. I know we mentioned having the different elementary schools or different principals come and make presentations as we're in the different zones. I think that would be something that would be beneficial for us to hear directly from them and maybe some of their team of what's going on, what are they doing, what are the things they need from us. And I know it comes through you.
Coming up with a schedule for that and
Okay.
a kind of a template of what you were looking for, and we plan to roll that out to the principals early August and probably start with schools that are ones that we are a little concerned about in school improvement, so you can get that information the quickest. So we do have a plan for that.
And then I wanted to say thank you for putting historical data. That helps us to know where we are. And it identifies we've got some growth issues. But again, looking forward to hear what you're putting in place to help drive that. I do think that, we're seeing that the learning loss is truly an issue, and we've got to figure out how do we attack that. But I appreciate you putting it together, and I look forward to more information after you do complete root cause analysis. I think this is the right direction of what we want to see going forward, but it's all about details, and then let us know how we can help you guys get to where you're trying to, what next level you're trying to get to. Thank you.
Harrison?
Thank you. Dr. Woodford, thank you so much for the report. I just want to take a moment to just really applaud the teachers and the staff for those PALS results. They are quite impressive, and I'm sure that a lot of hard work and effort went in to help get to those scores, and also praise to the parents as well and our students. In looking at your data for the VKRP data, social skills, that area, can you just speak to the root cause or just what you all have found to be perhaps maybe problem areas with the social skills? Because there was a decline, I realize it was just 2 percentage point, but we'd like to see an increase by the end of the year.
Right, and one of the things about these screening tools is that as the expectations increase, the benchmarks increase, so that 2% drop may also, a factor may be that there was more expected in the spring of kindergarten than when they first got there in the fall. I think what we are seeing in general is, students really wanting and needing, and I don't blame them, to be engaged, to have hands-on. I do think that we are seeing a generation that's very tied to media, TV, video type things. And so honestly, I think their social skills are typical. We are seeing a little bit of dysregulation, more so than we saw pre-pandemic. And I know that Mrs. Robertson and her team have been looking at how they can support the students and how our counselors can support students. New training techniques for our teachers just to deal with things that we might not have had to deal with prior to that. I know that in August we are sharing some information about school climate data, and she will be sharing some things that her staff is doing to address some of those things. I honestly think probably we are seeing typical social skills that our kindergartners have always struggled with. You know, they're young, they want to be active. There was nothing that really stood out in the data other than, you know, pretty much the things that they are working on, working in cooperative groups, sharing, you know, being able to have quiet time, knowing when they should be engaging others, wanting to be up and moving and active. So there was nothing that when we looked at it was alarming or that stood out as things we wouldn't normally be dealing with and addressing with our kids.
Good to know. I look forward to hearing the report in August.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Mr. Daniels?
Dr. Woodford, the numeracy under the VKRP math subsection from fall to spring was 83 to 67. Is that right?
Correct.
Can you explain what your thoughts are on what may have happened there? Is it different expectations that happened towards the end of the year? And if so, you can explain that, and then any course of action that we have for that.
So looking at the analysis that Mrs. Purdue provided to me and just looking at some of the issues, when students first enter kindergarten, every day they do a calendar type activity where they're looking at patterns and they're looking at shapes and things like that. And so traditionally, we spend a lot of time on that in kindergarten. Where they're struggling more is being able to say these 5 individual things make a group of 5, and so we're going to count by 5s. How do we count by 10s? How do we skip count by 3s? So really being able to have those higher level thinking pieces, not just that concrete shapes, patterns, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So where they're struggling is being able to make those bigger leaps in math. Our goal then is to move some of those skills so that we start really focusing on them earlier, along with patterns and along with shapes and all those things they did really well on, spending a little bit more time there, and doing some really intense intervention. We spend a lot of time intervening for reading difficulties in kindergarten, first and second. And so our team is really trying to refocus and say, just like we need those reading remediation skills, we need those math remediation skills. So I'm sorry, they're like fruit flies. I'm so sorry. I'm sure the people on TV are like, what is she doing? So really focus on good interventions in math that really get kids thinking about math outside the concrete, if that makes sense.
Sure, and I'm sure we're communicating this earlier and earlier with parents, or at least that's probably a best practice.
Correct.
So that they're getting that extra work at home.
Absolutely, and they get the scores from VKRP, you know, they get, so that they know kind of where their students are struggling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you talked about the root cause analysis for factors that impact student scores. And I'm sure you look at those to say, well, what can we get better in? Are we also looking at those and saying, we really excelled here, and let's take that? And are you looking at it from the positive aspect, I guess?
We are, and we're also looking to see if a school scored really well, what did they do? What did those teachers do? And how do we get those teachers collaborating with teachers that may not be doing as well with that. I think we've always done a good job of doing that in schools, collaboration. We want to increase that collaboration between schools. So we're sharing our ideas and sharing good curriculum. We have done, the supervisors, I say we, but our instructional supervisors have put a lot of time into bulking up our pacing guides, adding concrete activities that teachers can easily pull. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with those curriculum supervisors with not only support, but just resources that they can constantly use that make it easier for teachers to find the resources they need.
Dr. Woodford? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 3.03, audited financials. Dr. Bergen?
Turn this right over to Mr. Hagler. The information that he's going to be sharing in reference to the CAFR, the comprehensive audit, and the end-of-year financial report he's already reviewed with your committee members on the Finance Committee. I'll just lead off with, we have another clean audit, and that's because of Mr. Hagler's exceptional work as our Chief Finance Officer.
Yes, good evening. This is actually the audited financial statements for end of year FY 22. We just ended FY 23 a week ago. So we're in the process of doing that, and that should be completed in June sometime, so I'll bring that one to the board at that time. In regards to the FY 22 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, otherwise known as the CAFR in accounting circles and public education, it's put together jointly by the county and schools. So our data is part of the overall report that the county puts out. So when you look at the report, 166 pages long, it's on the Bedford County website, not on our website, but there's a link, you can get to that. A lot of that is a lot of, I would say, accounting jargon, notes to the financial statements, statistical reports. So to make reference to where can somebody look and what is the data that pertains to us is on, first of all, page 1 through 4, the external auditors make an opinion on the overall financial statements for the whole county, including us. And pleased to report that it is an unqualified opinion, which means the statements are presented fairly in all material respects with no adjustments or irregularities. So that's wonderful news for both the county and for us. Number 2, on page 94 and 98, they do break out our financials separately from the county, so you can get a good look at what our financial statements look like. I will say these financial statements are a lot different than our budget. Our budget is a cash-based basis that you pass, and everything I present to the board is on our projections and end-of-year balances, and everything is on a cash basis. But for presenting financial statements to the banking or lending community, and what's required is that you have to get to a modified accrual basis, which includes a lot of journal entries, a lot of notes, and a lot of adjustments to move to modified accruals. So to correlate this back to the cash budget is problematic and difficult because we are doing actuarial studies and we're doing projections to book journal entries to kind of reflect maybe unfunded liabilities and things that are out there. So on page 94 through 98 are broken out financial statements on the CAFR. And then another part that would pertain to the school board and to the school on pages 126 and 128, there's some statistical data that we present. Those are some statistical charts that I keep up. Most of that data comes from our annual school report that I submit to the state. There's some staffing level FTE counts on there, student counts, and some other data. Glad to report also when they do our external audit, they're looking at internal controls and other things that are both in the county and for us. For the school system, no corrective action for the schools was noted in their report, and no internal control weaknesses were noted also. So we're in sound shape there. Be happy to answer any questions you have on this. It's a pretty detailed report with the notes to that, but wanted to present that to the school board and see if you have any questions on that. Or if, when looking through it, if you have any questions, please feel free to call me.
Thank you. And moving on then to the end of year financial report.
Yes. So just ended the year, so this is preliminary financial data. I present quarterly on our finances. Usually during the year, the first, second, and third quarter is making sure that our projections are going to come in on budget and to see if there's any kind of concerns as we were going through the year. So did meet with the Finance Committee and go over this the other day with Mr. Nelms. And so I'll go over that, what I presented to him, and also on board docs and also on the screen. The first page is looking at the revenue and how we came in for the year. I will say in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, I saw our financials tighten up drastically. Expenditures were coming in higher than I had projected in the first half of the year. And revenues were looking pretty strong also. Mid-year, we went to the Board of Supervisors to do a supplemental appropriation on sales tax, because that was coming in so well, and to put it into the operating fund. They decided to move that over to the school maintenance reserve. So that $910,000 probably would have been part of my ending balance that I'm presenting tonight, but was moved mid-year. So when you see our ending balance, it's a lot lower, but that $900,000 was moved mid-year. So on the revenue side, you can see that we came up $378,000 below the revised budget. And just to remind you on that, those are supplemental appropriations are already taken in consideration and had been added into there. And you can see our supplemental appropriations approved by this board and also the Board of Supervisors was over $1 million. So compared to the revised budget and where we actually came in, about $378,000 less than projected, that's 0.3% off. So it was a nervous June. It's a big budget, $116 million, and watching the revenue come in, and I will say this to the rest of the board, and I explained this to Mr. Nelms. There are like 4 or 5 budget line items from the state. I do not know our actual numbers that I'm going to get until June. So there's not much time to maneuver, and some of those came in lower. I've already talked to staff. Some of those were just that the state had overprojected, and when they revised down. So I'll be watching that this year, but I need to be mindful for that in future budgets and stuff where there can be some erosion of revenue. We were able to bring the budget in this year, but I'll have to watch that very closely next year, and maybe in the next budget cycle, maybe kind of come back what the state's projecting, because if this continues, it kind of leaves us, hanging at the end of the year with a little bit less in revenue. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on the revenue sheet, but pretty close to target after supplemental appropriations.
Questions for Mr. Hagler?
If you go to the next page, I remembered. That's a first. On the expenditure side, you can see we came very close to budget on there. We're about $410,000 below budget. So when you put those two together, our ending balance is projected at $32,000 in the operating fund. Of $116 million, doesn't get much closer than that. So I'm glad we were able to bring the budget in so close and bring it in this year. As I said, midway through the year, I was feeling a little bit better, but as the year went on, some increase in expenditures and revenues declining kind of put pressure on us at the end of the year, but we were able to bring it in on budget with a little bit left over at the end of the year. Be happy to answer any questions you might have on the expenditure side. Okay. The next few pages gives a little bit more details on those major categories, but if you turn to the last page, and I'll go over the other funds outside the operating fund and how those finished up the year. As I said, this is pre-audit. These are projections. They should be final, but there may be adjusting entries if something was missed. But this should be what I expect. On the nutrition fund, over the last few years, that fund has ballooned and gone up quite a bit when we were doing feeding all children with federal funds and stuff. So the state actually is mandating that we spend that money down. We were doing quite a few expenditures on upgrades to our equipment, and that will probably continue into this year as we continue to evaluate that. But you can see net profit loss just over the year is about $600,000 down. We expected it to go down because of what we were doing on expenditures on equipment. So we're down to ending amounts of about 2.8. I would say our target is to be between 1.5 and 1.8 million, so we still have a ways to go to spend that money down. That money has to be spent on nutrition in the nutrition fund. With the cost of living increase and raises for this year, I expect that to erode on the salaries also as we go forward. So no big concern there. It's a healthy balance, but we do need to continue to probably spend that down to a level that the state wants to see that at, and that could take another couple of years to do that. The textbook fund, we finally got the entire adoption in this year, and so you can see there's a huge decrease in that fund, and we'll have to rebuild that up for the next adoption. So we started off with about 1.1 million, ended with about $327,000. So with the local money and state money going in there, we typically do not spend on reusable materials or textbook expenditures outside of adoptions, all that money, so we build that balance up for an adoption year. And we have, with Dr. Woodford, we track when those adoptions should take place, so we should be in good shape building up for our next adoption year. I'll address, there's a schedule I usually produce and show the board during the budget cycle to show that we're on target for the next 7 years and meeting our obligations to do adoptions or to buy new materials. The next fund is the maintenance fund. A lot of moving targets on this because we're still spending down a lot of the COVID ESSER 3 money. Should be done with that pretty close, probably the next few months as we finish up the Thomas Jefferson and also Goodview HVAC projects. So hopefully, but you can see the ending balance I'm projecting there available for projects. That's me taking out money for ongoing projects, is $4.3 million. Once that rolls into the new year, then we'll have another influx of local money into that, which will make that amount go up. I will work with the maintenance committee. As of right now, we're kind of on hold waiting to see and make sure we can get the projects for the auditoriums and the canopies going. And then that committee will go forward, look at the CIP that was passed by this board, start prioritizing and start spending that money down and scheduling those projects as soon as we can. Right now, we're not doing any of that because we want to make sure that the board has the funds necessary to do whatever they need to do to the canopies and also auditoriums. Hopefully, we'll be moving forward with that very quickly. But a very healthy balance there that will carry over. And then an influx of an additional, I think for this year, it's about, for what we're putting aside in the county, another $3.3 million coming into that fund. So you can see that will balloon almost up to about $7 million. From the CIP plan, there's a lot of projects that need to be done, and that money will be spent. We looked at it over the next 7, 8 years, and that will go for a lot of the replacement items that we need to do, not for expansion, but for replacement. So that fund's in good shape at this point. Any questions so far on those?
So on the maintenance fund, were all CIP projects that we approved for 22-23 school year, all of those were completed is what?
No, sir. There were some that we did not get to, and so those would be the first ones that we, and I can bring that list back to the board as far as what's next on target for those. There were a couple smaller ones, but the major ones are either in progress being designed and have to go out for bid or in progress right now. There were a couple smaller ones that did not get into this summer, and those would probably be the ones that would be highlighted going into next year.
So I do want to understand, and maybe the facilities committee has this answer already, but if we've got projects that we approved to be done in 22-23, I don't understand why they're not done. If we've got $4.5 million in an ending balance, I don't understand that.
Well, I will say with the TJ and Goodview projects and also the HVAC projects, it's a cash flow issue also, because those projects are going on, you have to spend the money, and then you have to wait to get reimbursed for those. So part of this is the balance goes way down as we're making our expenditures, and it could take a month or two to get the cash back in. So I'm not allowed to really go negative on the cash, so I have to wait for those revenues to flow in before I can really start expending those. So sometimes it's just a cash flow issue that we're spending in a given month. On some of those projects, we're spending $1.2 million. It goes down, and then a month or two later, I get $1.2 million back. So
I know
I'm
that
having to
money's
maintain
coming
that.
in. Why am I delaying other projects? Can we not, is that something that we can give you the approval to do, knowing that the fact that we're going to get the 1.2 so we can go ahead and get the other projects started?
Well, there's nowhere else. It's really cash and not going negative on the cash in that fund. So it's just a cash.
Only by that fund. You can't do we can't create an account that gives you a cash flow for all, as long as you're tracking where that dollar is moving back and forth. Can we give you that?
I'd have to approach the county about that. I mean, I'm
Okay.
just, they're the ones that control the appropriations and the cash flow on that. And in addition, as I said earlier, I know the priority for the board were the canopies and the auditoriums, and not knowing what was going to happen with, the Board of Supervisors or anything like that, some of this was being held back and not moving forward to make sure your number one project and number two projects could be fully funded. This money could have gone for that, and we're hoping that what the county did with the tax rate will go for that. But if that didn't happen, what I was hearing from the board, you wanted funding that you could pull the trigger on that to get some things done. So some of that is like we postponed on purpose. The other reason is there's a certain amount of projects that we can actually get to in a given summer with our maintenance staff. So, yes, we might have the money to do 12 projects, but how thin can we spread ourselves in getting those done? We'll start tackling that very quickly, and I imagine a lot of this stuff will be spent down between now and the summer of '24, and we'll get these started. A lot of these projects will get going pretty quickly.
I guess my concern is if I'm sitting on another board and I see that we're ending the year with $4.5 million, and you're coming to me to ask for more, well, you didn't even spend what I gave you.
Well,
So-
I'll say with the other board, and I presented that I knew I was going to have carryover money, and I was projecting even when I went to the Board of Supervisors, but that money was put into the forecast, and we looked at all the replacement things we need to do over the next 7 years. And when talking to them, that money was going to be earmarked for that, plus the influx of the new money, and that would take care of all of our replacement projects, not additions. So we're going to get moving on those. It's just that, when you look at the 23 year, projects that we didn't do in the 23 year probably amounts to $300,000 or $400,000 maybe. Now that we're getting into the next year, there are some years that have a lot more in cost because it's a bigger project. For instance, you could be in the given year and you have $1 million project, but next year we might have a $4 million project. You're not going to spend it all down because you're banking the money to do the big project next year.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying and completely understand. So maybe, once a quarter or something we're showing, what is that $4.5 million slated for? What have we
Yes, sir.
accomplished? What are we saving money for? So people don't have this misconception that, well, they've got $4.5 million they're sitting on. I've heard a couple people come and stand and say that when it's not a true statement. We've got it allocated. We've got those dollars committed to things that we as a board have said that's what we want to go do.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make sure that we're being very transparent and saying, yeah, the ending balance is $4.5 million, but here's the projects that our community parents, students have said we want. We've agreed to it. Here's the dollar sign attached to it.
What I can do is probably on this, I'll probably have a subset of this report quarterly to bring to you and brief on the CIP projects and relate and give that. It's similar to the textbook adoption. You might have a large textbook fund. And you go, why are you sitting on that money? Because next year, I'm going to have a $1.2 million expenditure.
Right.
It's similar to the CIP that if there's a project in the 24 year, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but if there's a project in next year that we have slotted that's going to be a $5 million project, if I'd spend all this down, I wouldn't have $5 million next year to launch on that. So it's banking money up to do the bigger projects also.
I just think that's beneficial to highlight.
Yep. It is on the whole CIP plan is on our website, and you can see the projects and what the order is, and we'll continue to update. But it's on our website, the CIP plan, and you can see what projects and where they're slotted, and kind of see what we're banking our money for, and what we're saving up so we can get going on that.
I
Yes,
know
sir.
that, but everybody that's watching doesn't.
Okay.
Go to that website and click and look. You know, if we can present it and make it easy, I think it's a good reminder to say, hey, we haven't forgot about these projects. These are on our radar.
Yep. And it's probably as easy as taking the CIP plan for the replacement cycle and showing exactly that and saying, it's on the plan, we're going to launch on it this year. These are the next ones. These are the order that we're going to do it in, so they know where the money's going. Yes, sir. The final fund is the self-insured fund, and very happy to report we had a very good year on that. I would say usually self-insured fund, we do pretty good most years, break even. Some years we do a lot better, and every 7 to 8 years you have a bad year. And it really, you see money flow out very bad. And it really is based upon catastrophic or very large claims. That's what's insurance for. It's there to protect people when they have really high dollar cost claims, and we're in this together. But you can see we started the year at 5.3 million, and my estimated ending balance is 6.8. If you remember, we did go up on the rate last year. We did no rate increase this year. And based upon what I'm seeing now, if we have a very level year this year, I think with our self-insured fund and our health insurance, we've only gone up 5% in the last 5 years, which I don't think many plans have experienced that good of a run. And so I credit our employees, our wellness plan, and people being very dedicated to being cash conscious, and also just maintaining good health and good habits. So
What's the required balance on that one?
there's no required balance.
So we can get as low as $0?
We pay the claims as they come in, so if it's zero balance and a claim comes in for $400,000, I don't have the money, I can't pay the claim. I have to have cash in the bank to pay claims. I would say when you're looking at that balance, if it continues to go up, we can look at several different options to give back to employees. And I think that's what you're thinking about.
Sir.
I don't want it to see it balloon more than that. And we have made tweaks to the plans over the last 3 years because we've been running well, where we've added some services in that are covered that weren't covered before. And we've included some prescriptions that weren't covered and we start covering. So we're enhancing the plan as we're running well to give more back, especially the biggest area that we did that is in the diabetes area with pharmaceuticals and devices. And we made big headway on that and helping our employees out with that are suffering from that. So I'm always looking at tweaking the plan to give back to the employees as we go forward. I don't want to overcharge and balloon this too big, but when you have a year that's bad and you see $4 million flow out, you want to make sure you have money in the bank to go ahead and pay the claims. And that's why you want to have a healthy balance on that. Any other questions?
Ms. Harrison?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hagler, thank you so much for the report. I'm not really certain whether this question applies to the information that you've shared with us, and maybe Dr. Bergen can help enlighten me as well. I know, and bear with me as I'm trying to frame this where everyone would understand it, but at the state level, if I'm not mistaken, a while back, there was an error made regarding funding, I believe, for,
Yep.
and some of it affected some districts. And so I'm just kind of curious about our district, our school system. What impact, if any, did it have?
No impact to last year's budget. The revised budget that the state adopted, known as the skinny budget as right now, they held us harmless for FY23. FY24 they didn't. They were just rebuilding the whole budget, so they weren't just going to, there was an error, they just weren't going to give that money out. They fixed that, but they knew it caused a lot of problems for districts, that if they were going to take that money away from the error, so they held all districts harmless for FY23, so there was no impact to us. We were able to complete our budget. And what Ms. Harrison is stating is that in the calculation tools that the DOE gave us, there was substantial error in that if they would have pulled back, would have taken a lot of money away from us. But we already had a passed budget, and we were already well into the year and hired most of our staff. It's like all of a sudden, if that money flowed away, it's like, what do we do? And it could have been, it was, I think, $1.2 million for us. So I'm glad the state held us harmless on that, and because that would have caused a lot of difficulty last year, as for a lot of other districts also. But that wasn't guaranteed for FY24. we've got new tools and new metrics to work off. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
More questions for Mr. Hagler?
Great, thank you.
Moving on to 4.01, policy updates. Dr. Bergen?
Yes, ma'am. Tonight, we have just 6 policies before the board as an information item. These 6 policies came through the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee at their last meeting on June 27th. As always, for the viewing public, if you want the detail on the red line version of what are the changes, there is a link available through the agenda. I'll just give you a quick synopsis of what are those changes. Of the 6 policies, 4 of them are changing really as a direct result of change in state or federal law, beginning with EB, school crises, emergency management, and medical response plan. The policy's been updated to reflect an amendment in state law requiring that the superintendent include the designation of a division safety official with school safety audits when they're submitted to the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety. This really is not a change in practice for us. We do have a safety manager, and he has always been, that position has been the designee. This just simply codifies that that's a requirement for school divisions to name someone. Policy EBB threat assessment teams has also been updated to reflect an amendment to state law requiring that new threat assessment team members complete an initial threat assessment training and all threat assessment team members complete refresher threat assessment training every 3 years. Again, no change in practice for Bedford County. We already have been training our threat assessment team members. This just requires and codifies that requirement for all school divisions. Policy DJA, purchasing authority, edits include the addition of language that mandates that the superintendent or designee pursue direct owner purchasing on large dollar components for contracts over $200,000. And this, again, has been our practice and will continue to be our practice as now in our policy. Policy JECA, admission of homeless children, changes to this policy are just to clarify the definition of what is a homeless student as it is defined in federal law. Policy JFC, student conduct. The policy's been updated to reflect an amendment in state law regarding notification of bullying allegations and notification by the principal when a student's conduct is likely to result in a suspension or filing of a court petition. And finally, policy KG, community use of school facilities. Substantial changes to this policy are not driven by state or federal law. These changes were with lots of discussion with the board's representation to the Policy Review Committee. Those changes include a rewording of the opening section or the policy statement, the addition of allowing for security expenses to be an applicable fee when necessary, the shifting of the approval process from the principal of the school to the approval being at the school board level for any group that does not have their principal place of business in Bedford County. Limiting facility rentals for any groups or entities that do not have their principal place of business in Bedford County to being able to lease or use our facilities only during the summer. And finally, expanding on the list of considerations that would allow for the rejection of an applicant if there are some concerning things about that organization. We've just expanded upon that list and add them into policy. Again, I'd encourage anyone, as you're interested, the red line versions and the full details are available through the link on the website. And if there are any questions, both members of the IGA committee are here and could help me address any questions you may have. Madam Chair, that's it for my summary.
Thank you, Dr. Bergen. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to item 9.01, speaking of policy updates. Do I have a motion to approve the policy updates presented at the June 8th, 2023 board meeting?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nelms. Sorry, Mr. Holbrook, I think I heard him first. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 10, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Bergen.
Yes, ma'am. Just give our technology crew a minute to put up the first slide. The end of the school year and the end of our athletic programming for the last school year brought more great accomplishments for our students. The Virginia High School League selected their players for first team All-State. We're really proud to share that Jesse Brown from Stanton River High School was named All-State for third base in baseball. In soccer, Jefferson Forest High School, congratulations to 3 students, Haston Lynn on defense, Chris Wiley at midfield, and Tyler Beck in goalie. All 3 of these soccer players made All-State. Also, Chris Wiley was named the Region Player of the Year, and Coach Scott Zaring was named the Region Coach of the Year. Also from Stanton River, Emily Kaiser was named the Blue Ridge District's Academic Athlete. Congratulations to all of these athletes and our coaches on their accomplishments. Next up, it's not only our students showing their pride on the court or the field or the diamond, but also in their extracurricular activities in other ways. Forest Middle and Liberty High School both have Yovaso clubs, and those Yovaso clubs recently competed in the 2023 Arrive Alive campaign. Out of 76 teams competing, their teams placed first in their education of bike, pedestrian, and passenger safety, as well as on the importance of speaking up if you feel unsafe riding in any vehicle. Also, Nicholas Keller, who is a Jefferson Forest High School CTE student, competed in the Microsoft Office U.S. National Championship and took home first place. He competed against top students from across the nation in his skills using Microsoft Office products, including Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And as finishing in first place, he will now compete in August in the World Championship. Continuing on the celebration of the great accomplishments of our students, the 97th Virginia FFA State Championship was held this past June at Virginia Tech University. We had 34 students attend from Liberty Middle School, Liberty High School, and Stanton River High School, competing against their peers in various competitions. Anna Grow won State Proficiency Award in Goat Entrepreneurship, and Kelsey Weston, also of Stanton River High School, was chosen to serve as the 2023-24 FFA State President. We are, of course, very proud of these students and all of our FFA students and their sponsors. Next up, the Bauer Center for the Arts, along with the Bedford Area Chamber of Commerce, had an unveiling and ribbon cutting on June 30 for the newest love sign in Bedford County, which was designed by students from Liberty High School. This love sign, which celebrates the cultural and arts of Bedford County, is one of 60 signs in Central Virginia and 300 across the Commonwealth. Our JROTC cadets have been busy as well this summer. Most recently, they played an important role at the Flag Day ceremony that was held in downtown Bedford at Centertown Park. I am always in awe every time I see these young men and women representing our school division so professionally with such tremendous discipline and pride. Pictured here are students from our adult education program, who in partnership with Hooker Furniture have been developing their workplace readiness skills. These adult students, who are all fluent in Spanish, receive certificates of completion in the English as a Second Language program as adult learners. Other employers who may be interested in this program, we would welcome you to contact our adult education coordinator for more information. And here are this month's 3 things you need to know. Number 1, we do have another graduation coming up. Our summer school graduation will be held on the 25th of July at 1 o'clock in the Gibson Auditorium. Hope to see you there. Secondly, as has recently been reported in the press, we have our annual Pack the Bus. This is an event to collect school supplies for children in need, and this year's event will be held on Friday, August 4th, between the hours of 12 and 6 p.m. at the Bedford Walmart. However, donations, both monetary and supplies, are being collected now at various drop-off locations throughout Bedford County, so members of the community, please look for those drop-off boxes and help a child in need. And number 3, as we gear up for the new school year, our new hire orientation will be held on August 3rd for all new staff and on August 4th for all teachers who are new to Bedford County. Now, I've got a couple more for you. I had 3 on the slide, but then during the discussion here tonight, I have a number 4. If you have a kindergartner, please register them for school. We are missing some of our kindergartners, and we would really appreciate knowing them in advance so we can properly staff and prepare for your child. So if you know your child is of kindergarten age and they are not registered, please register them tomorrow. Also, we had some questions here from the board about our projects from our CIP. I would like the board is aware, I'd like the community to be aware, we are very cognizant of a strong desire to want to move forward with awnings and auditoriums and have that conversation shift from just talking about it to doing it. And so we do have a joint facilities committee meeting next week. As our members from this school board and members from our board of supervisors are going to be meeting next Wednesday, the 19th of July at 6 p.m. And we're going to talk about the scope and sequence of those projects. It's not new information for us. We're just further informing our partners in the board of supervisors and our community about what our needs are, what our options are, and what our financing will be so that we can get forward and have a request for proposal so we can start to design and then eventually get to building and making those significant improvements. And then lastly, if the board would just allow me a moment of personal privilege, we have one person in this room who is attending their last school board meeting. Dr. Fred Connors will be officially retiring as of the 1st of August. Fred has been with this school division for 25 years. He has served the children and the parents in this community as a special education teacher. He was the principal at Otter River Elementary School. He was the principal at the BSTC, which we now refer to as Gibson. He was an assistant director in our CTE programming, and he has wonderfully served as our human resources director for the past 6 years. We're not just going to miss his expertise in all those areas. He's just genuinely one of the nicest human beings I've ever had the privilege of knowing and working with, and we're going to sorely, sorely miss having his smile around. Thank you, Fred, for all of your devotion to this county and to the children of Bedford County in particular. Madam Chair, that completes my comments.
Okay, Dr. Bergen. And moving on to committee reports. We'll start at this end of the table with Mr. Daniels. Nothing? Mr. Nelms?
I think Randy handled the finance report very well. Thank you for that.
Okay. Mr. Hill?
I don't have anything.
Wow. Mr. Holbrook?
Thing either.
Okay, Ms. Harrison?
Well, Dr. Bergen shared the information regarding the facility committee meeting, having a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors along with some other county staff on the 19th. So I look forward to meeting with them and us having a discussion about the canopies and also the auditoriums at Liberty High School and Stanton River. And of course, the last board meeting that the Laurel School had was back in May, and so we're scheduled, I believe, to have one in August or September.
So now we're going to move on to comments, and you know I kind of start where I picked up with the committee. So, Ms. Harrison, you have any comments?
All right. I'll just keep it rolling here.
Keep going.
Well, first, I want to certainly echo Dr. Bergen's sentiments regarding Dr. Connor. He is just a wonderful human being. I don't know any other way to put it. And you're going to be greatly missed. I'm going to say Fred. I'm not going to be formal right now. Because he's, I think about trying to fill your shoes at Otter River. But I made my own footprints because yours were just too big for me to try to fill. And I'm going to just say it again. You're just such a fine person, Fred, and you're going to be greatly missed. You just have a way of putting a smile on a person's face and making you see the bright side of things. So I appreciate the conversations you and I have had, how you've helped me when I was serving I just thank you. And lastly, I want you to know that you're going to enjoy your retirement. You are. Just think about those Monday mornings where you don't even have to even get up for work. You could just do whatever you want to. It's wonderful, believe me. And I wish you all the best, and God bless you. God bless you. I also wanted to say that I hope everyone's having a great summer break, because school will be starting bite my tongue real soon. But I do hope that our teachers out there and our paraprofessionals, that they all are just enjoying their break and their summer break, and also the staff here, that you're getting some time in as well. And I also want to encourage everyone to support the Liberty High School booster yard sale that they're going to be having. I think that's coming up, is it next week?
It's last Saturday of the month.
Last Saturday of the month.
Last
so-
Friday, they're actually gonna have Friday night and Saturday.
Okay, so if, and they're still taking donations. I learned that this evening. So if you have some things that you want to get rid of, or that you just would like to contribute, I know that they will welcome it. In fact, I'm going to give my granddaughter's Barbie doll. That's a hot thing, though, those so hot wheels. So I plan on donating that to the boosters to try to help. I believe it or not, but that's all that I have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say to all the parents of the 42 kids that hopefully the flexibility that was given to the administrative staff tonight will fix the majority of the problem. It may not fix them all, but it's probably the best option that we got moving forward. And like I said, there's no guarantees from here on out, but hopefully it does fix the problem for the people that the kids that have already started and spent their entire childhood at that school. Hopefully they can finish it there. Like I say, don't really have that problem in the middle schools. So just want to reiterate that.
Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. Mr. Nelms?
I don't really have a lot tonight. I do want to give a shout out to the Stanton River Middle School cheer team for inviting me to their fundraiser they had for their car washing event. It was a hot day, I will say that, and a lot of cars got washed. And I'm going to steal Susan's normal bus driver plea. School year's approaching. We need bus drivers. So if you know some people that are retired or anything, please tell them to apply. Fred, you will be missed. We have a long history, I know, but you will be missed. So just congratulations on your retirement. And then just some other exciting news. I will be a dad again. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. So February 2024.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Mr. Daniels?
Just want to echo what Mr. Holbrook said about the flexibility. I always think it's good to give our team the tools that they need to make the best decision. And like you said, I think that was the best option that we had, and I'm glad it was brought to our attention again, and I'm glad that we were able to move on that. So with that, Dr. Woodford, now that we're potentially going to have some of these mixed-use kind of classes and combined classes, and maybe have some classes that are going above where we were, I think it's important that we continue on a maybe it can't be monthly, but a semi-regularly basis every couple months to get data on how these classes are doing relative to other classes in the same grades, I guess. So you guys will be able to put that together, and we'll be able to refine some questions based on that and see how it's working. I think it's important that if we don't track it and don't evaluate it, we don't know what we're getting out of it. So I think that that's important. So if we could look into that, that'd be great. Normally, I try to be pretty cheery in my closing comments, but there's been a lot of things that have been happening that I think are highly important and maybe even tough to talk about. But I think it's important that we do talk about them because we can't turn a blind eye to a lot of this. Two headlines from this past week. California Assembly Public Safety Committee blocks SB 14, which would have made human trafficking a of a minor a serious felony in California. And then the Department of Justice removed human trafficking information from their website. I think this should be concerning to everybody here. You know, we have billboards through this county from our sheriff warning about human trafficking. Our former Sheriff Mike Brown has made this fight his life's work. You know, last month we heard a very shocking and heartbreaking story about Sage. It was a story about grooming and then ultimately human trafficking. This happened in a neighboring community that's very near to us here in Bedford. And for those that say it can't happen here, I kind of think that's wishful thinking or ignorance being bliss. It was not an easy story to listen to, but that pales in comparison to what she and her family went through. Some sat in this crowd and were listening very intently. Others were rolling their eyes and smirking, and I find that absolutely disgusting. You know who you are. I'm glad to hear that Sage is doing better, and we pray that she will have a very fulfilling and successful life, and we pray that she will find peace. There's a lot of stories that we may see and hear about, abuse, neglect, etc., and as adults, we are in a position to protect our children, and that's our highest obligation. So with that, if you haven't done so already, there's a new movie out called The Sound of Freedom. I encourage you to buy a ticket. It's not an easy movie to get through. It was almost never released, but it's out now. It's very eye-opening. It's up to us that want a better future for our children to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect them. I heard a quote the other day. It says, "Attacking innocence is the biggest act of cowardice." Our kids are precious and innocent, and we must do everything as people in a position of influence to protect that innocence. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Hill?
Y'all write this one down. I don't have any comments tonight.
Please make a note of this one.
I got it.
I know sometimes when we have, well, first of all, I want to thank all the parents who have stood up and sent us emails regarding their concern over the zone transfers. I know there are times, when, especially when we have hot button issues, we have parents involved. We get a lot of parents. We get inundated with phone calls. We get inundated with emails. I'm going to encourage all parents to get involved, to stay involved. Don't wait for a hot button topic to come up to figure out what's going on. Know what's going on and talk to us. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what you're thinking unless we hear from you. So please, please keep those lines of communication open. Dr. Connor, thank you. Thank you. I'll keep it simple. Just thank you. And just best of luck on this next chapter. When we had the presentation for the end of the year data, and you were talking about the training that everyone went through, you said something that stuck with me, and I hope we continue to hold on to this. You said that the pandemic can no longer be a crutch, and it can't. It's time to move on. I came out here last night to the fall sports meeting, and during that meeting, Mr. Hagler presented the number of students at Liberty High School that are on the honor roll. To me, that was super impressive. And the reason I've always promoted kids being involved in extracurriculars and sports, there are so many studies out there saying that the students that are involved in sports and activities do perform better in school. They do perform academically better. And I know my own son has even said, "Mom, I have to stay involved in stuff because I just point blank do better in school." So that's why I always encourage that. And I would consider if there's any way you can get your children involved, please do. When Dr. Bergen was going through his report, he showed a picture of JROTC, and I see those show up quite often. That program has really impressed me the way it's turned around, because it seems like just a few years ago, you remember this, they were before us saying that they didn't know if they could keep pushing, if they could keep going any longer just because they didn't have participation, and now they're thriving, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm trying to keep this short and sweet. Our facilities meeting next week, it's in the school board conference room at 6 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's out there too. And it will be on our YouTube channel.
Streaming.
Okay, so it will be streamed. So if you can't make it to the meeting, please know it will be streamed.
Yep, I'm getting looks. Diana, did we have that discussion?
Yes, sir, we did. At the time, you said that we were not going to stream it.
Let me backtrack. My apologies, because I heard school board and I immediately went to, we stream all of our meetings. We typically don't stream committee meetings. We could stream this meeting. The equipment's in the room. We'll just have to encumber staff to be there. Is that the wish of the board, that we stream a committee meeting? I don't want to set any precedents of streaming all committee meetings.
Well, I think considering the importance of this and the fact that it's not going to be just the committee, because I know I'm going to be present. I know Mr. Tuck is going to be present.
Yes.
I believe we should stream this one. Does anyone object to that?
No, not at all.
I think the community wants it, until it would keep overcrowding from happening in that room, because that's one of the reasons why we moved out of that room, is because of the capacity.
Okay.
Okay.
Staff, I'm sorry about the staff having to set up and all, but anyways.
As much as I hate to tell everyone this, but I always look forward to this one, to seeing the progress of everything. Unfortunately, our next meeting will be our back to school meeting, so we will get to hear updates to what has been going on during the summer. And I know there's been talk about the safety issues and safety measures that have been going on, and hopefully we will get an update about those next month. And Ms. Harrison mentioned the boosters. They are impressive out here as well. They went from, I believe Ms. Minio said last night, from no members 3 years ago to 100 members now. The list of accomplishments and things that they have done is impressive. And Liberty Pride is coming back, and it's wonderful to hear. And with that being said, I'm going to wish everyone to have a great rest of the summer. Enjoy the time that you have. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nelms, before I even got it out of my mouth. Any discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.